I tried to make some and I emptied it
Are we
out.
ready to start?
One of my cats said, "Look,
We're recording.
put a kitty litter."
We're good.
Meeting, please come to order. Barbara, please call the roll.
Okay, we Commissioners Levine, Berard, McLean Hill, and Vasquez present.
Thank you, and Commissioner Noonan will be here. I am told she got stuck, but I think she should be here soon. This proceeding is broadcast on Channel 35. The exact broadcast times can be found by contacting Channel 35. I have no opening remarks. I'm told we have one public comment card. Is that correct, Barbara?
Yes.
Call that person.
Okay, Jack Humperville.
My name is Jack Humphreyville. I'm affiliated with the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council, and I'm also the chair of the DWP committee. I want to talk in general comment about some transparency. The first is we're looking forward to the annual report that is going to be prepared, I think, shortly, once you get the audited financials for both the water and power systems. The way I view this, it's about a 10-year look back on DWP. It also involves taking a strong look at the pension plans, what's happened over the last 10 years and what are some of the projections for future payments, recognizing that the DWP pension plan is probably underfunded by about $3 or $4 billion when you use realistic rates of return. The third thing I would want to talk about is the agenda, and I want to talk about the litigation. I'm sure nobody knows what the hell you're talking about when you say somebody versus the city of Los Angeles. I think you should follow the rules or follow the procedures that the city council is using, where they have a description of the litigation so we have an understanding of what's going on, as opposed to talking about section this and section that, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, that was the only speaker for item 2.
Okay, General Manager. Nothing. Comments from commissioners. Commissioner Barad,
Thank you.
who it is very good to have back with us.
Oh, thank you very much.
Again.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the staff what's happening with water conservation efforts at the Los Angeles School District, because I haven't heard anything, and I haven't heard anything about our bucket brigade and what that, do we still have that program? What's going on? I saw in the newspaper that we have a contest for students to come up with a poster, but that's really not what we had in mind when we talked about the bucket brigade, and that was actual experience with water conservation at home and in the schools. And I really don't want this to fall through the cracks because we first discussed this over 2 years ago. So if I could have some kind of a report on that, I would appreciate it.
I just have a quick comment related to the ongoing work that we're doing around customer service, customer process, etc. And just wanted to make an observation regarding a concern that was raised directly with me regarding water issues and a water link at a private residence. Without being specific in a way that would compromise privacy, I did want to compliment the department staff. The feedback I got with respect to their response to the issue was positive, both as it relates to their arriving on time. They're being very, very professional in terms of their interaction with the homeowner. Obviously, these matters take a while to resolve, and so anytime you're looking at a situation where there is a customer who is concerned about a tremendous spike in a bill, those issues aren't resolved on the spot. But as we continue to look at how we are dealing with members of the public, I did want to compliment our staff, at least as it relates to what they're doing on the ground to represent the agency and to service our customers. And so please, I'm not sure who went out on that call, but we can follow up after the fact, and if you would relay that commendation to them, that would be really appreciated.
Vasquez.
Good morning, everyone. Happy post-Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I would like to request a presentation or some information about how the fires have affected DWP. I know that the fires have not been particularly in our area, but in a way, I feel like everyone has been affected. And especially with issues of utilities not similar to ours, but found at fault for a lot of the fires, the causing of the fires. So I'm not sure if this is the best day to have that discussion, but I would like to have an in-depth conversation around how the fires is affecting DWP, if we prepare for something like that, God forbid if ever happens here in Los Angeles, and how we responded at the state level to the other, to what other utilities are also facing regarding insurance and being at fault for the fires.
Okay, thank you all for those. Ratepayer advocate?
I will have comments on items 8B, the once-through cooling presentation at the end of the presentation. And a brief comment now on item 13. The materials provided in item 13 with the agreement with Public Works was a step up in the transparency of the costing of these arrangements, and we think that's a positive move with the additional detail provided on those costs charged to DWP from other city departments.
Thank you. Barbara, discussion with neighborhood council representatives on any neighborhood council resolution or community impact statement filed with the city clerk, which relate to any agenda item listed or being considered on this agenda for the Water and Power Board.
No community impact statements or formal positions were filed by any neighborhood councils on the items on today's agenda.
Okay, we're going to follow our new procedure of identifying those items that can be approved on consent, along with those that need some discussion before there's a vote prior to the management reports. So for items 10 through 19, I know we need to pull item 17. It's linked to Management Report 8A. So I'd like to pull item 17 from the consent calendar. As for items 11 through 16, 18, and 19, are there any other items that any commissioners would like to pull from the consent calendar?
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay, so hearing none, is there a motion to approve items 11 through 16 and 18 and 19?
So moved.
Second, those in favor?
Aye.
Those are approved. Okay. Management reports. 8A, Power Integrated Resource Plan.
So for this item, Senate Bill 350 requires that the governing body of a publicly owned utilities, meaning this Board of Water and Power Commissioners, approve that power system's 2017 Integrated Resource Plan by January 1, 2019. This report must be submitted to the California Energy Commission by April 1st, 2019, and will be presented by Eric Montag, the Senior Manager of Strategic Initiatives and Resource Development. With him is also Joe Romalo, the Assistant General Manager of Communications, Media, and Community Affairs, who will explain LADWP's Clean Energy Future Communications Framework and our outreach efforts to our various stakeholders and interested groups.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Eric Montag. I'm here to talk about the board item for the CEC IRP. Before I do, I'd like to take just a quick step back and briefly discuss why you even have this in front of you. So as we all know, LADWP centers around three basic principles: safe and reliable power, cost-effective power, and environmental stewardship. We establish our clean energy plan and SLTRP, which I will talk about briefly, around these three concepts. You will hear more later on about this LA plan from Mr. Romalo here. So the IRP, again, you have the California Energy Commission Integrated Resource Plan. LADWP had an integrated resource plan long before the CEC established theirs. And our plan dates back almost a decade ago, where we lay out our strategic plans and programs to provide reliable electricity. It lays out our demand side programs, and it illustrates our RPS goals and objectives and energy efficiency. It's basically our plan for the future on how we're going to be a cleaner utility with the three basic principles. In October 2015, SB 350 passed, and that law established the 20%, the 33% 2020 RPS goals, and the goals that you know of today, the 50% by 2030. But it also established this IRP requirement that the largest POUs and utilities would submit their most current integrated resource plan. In 2015, our current plan was the 2016 IRP. But because of this new law establishing a California Energy Commission IRP, we took the steps to change ours the following year so that we didn't have these two competing same name documents. So that will come next. The 2016 IRP, this is a planned document that we reach out to stakeholders, environmental groups, business advocates, and we establish a procedure, which Mr. Romalo will walk through a little bit because we're going into the next go-around, where we bring in all the inputs and we create scenarios and cases of what would our best business plan be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. From those cases, we establish all the criteria and we analyze the best one, and we come up with a recommended case. And that's what we are functioning on right now, is the 2016 recommended case. Because of the IRP for this California Energy Commission, we proceeded to follow up our next year, which is an update year. So take a step back. Every even year, when we establish these IRP recommended cases, we reach out to the public, we bring in all this info, and we establish this document here. And it has everything that we outreach and plan for. From there, the recommended case comes, and we publish it. The next year, the 2017, we do not do the same outreach. We update the data, the cost. It's just an update year. And we keep the same recommended case. And it was in 2017 that we chose to change the name from our DWP IRP to the Strategic Long-Term Resource Plan. It's a little clunky at first, but it's very apropos to what the objective is. We extended out our horizon to 2050, and we captured more of our strategic direction that we foresee this department going in. So that brings us to today. Today, you are here to have consideration the CEC IRP. The CEC IRP is a subset of these IRPs. It's the recommended case only. This is why the CEC IRP is so small. It's just a very finite recommended case, and the data and other requirements established by the California Energy Commission on data that they want to see that we do not necessarily put into our IRP. This is why this public document, you might see some redacted information. That is system-sensitive information, but it is required by the CEC submittal. So what is the CEC? Most of this stuff we already kind of covered. It's required by SB 350. It requires a governing body, which is this board, to approve it at the end of this year so that we can submit it by this year, go through a couple-month process of review, and because it's the first year, the CEC kind of gave a window where if things need to be tweaked for whatever reason, they want that done before April, and it becomes official in April and submitted as a public document. Some of the other aspects of this, whereas ours is updated annually with a biannual or every 2-year public outreach, this is a 5-year document. So we will not need to come back to this board until 2022 to give you the next version, which would at that point stem from our 2022 IRP. So again, every 5 years we submit this. Last part I want to highlight is this process, as I mentioned, is a public process every even number of years. What this table demonstrates that in 2016, we outreached to the public, established our 2016 IRP, got our recommended case, and carried it over into our 2017 SLTRP. No public outreach, but that 2017 recommended case is the basis of the 2017 CEC IRP, which you are considering today. I think that's, any questions on that?
So Eric, just to clarify, so basically this is a subset of other work that we've done that's all been done publicly and with a lot of input from a number of stakeholders and other groups. So it's basically a sort of a Reader's Digest summary of some of that to meet the state requirements. There's nothing new here that hasn't gone to the public. It's just a repackaging of it to meet the latest requirements. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a subset, but it does have new CEC required info that is more technical based that we do not consider in our current one. And
So
that
that's the part that's redacted because it's not public
That is
information.
correct.
Right.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. First, with respect to, you touched on it just a little bit, but with respect to this, the CEC requirements, I'm curious as to whether or not, I know that for our purposes, that we engage in a comprehensive outreach effort to inform our now strategic integrated resource plan. But does the CEC require public outreach in connection with the IRP that they are requiring submission of every 5 years?
I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to turn real quick.
They do not?
They do not.
Okay. And then also, you indicated that because this is the first time that there's sort of a review process that'll be taking place, potential tweaking, et cetera, to make sure that by April, the documents that have been provided by the various entities across the state can be public. Is there, and again, I'm not intimately familiar with Senate Bill 350 with respect to this particular element, and so I'm curious as to, is there some evaluation of the plan, or is this a requirement that, I mean, is the state simply trying to aggregate this information so that it is publicly available? Is there any possibility that they could take issue with anything that's submitted? I'm just kind of curious as to the purpose of this new requirement.
So their IRP foundation stemmed a lot from our IRP because we had an IRP at the time. And so when they went through the state process of establishing this IRP requirement, they took a lot of that from us, as you can tell, because it's really a lot of our stuff, but they added some extra, you know, these technical requirements. So
Well, no, so for instance, specifically I'm interested in the addition. So they created this requirement that entities submit IRPs.
Yep.
And in the context of that, they requested specific technical data. Is this for the purpose of monitoring compliance? Or I'm just curious as to how the state will be utilizing this information.
So,
and
yes, I think
Yeah,
you're
just-
absolutely right. What they are concerned about, California has very aggressive
Yes.
greenhouse gas reduction and environmental targets. And because the publicly owned utilities do not have a reporting oversight responsibility with any regulatory state body, they reach out, and they've made this requirement for the 7 largest publicly owned utilities. There are a lot more than that, but if you don't reach that threshold, because they figure if they get the 7,
we've got kind of swooped up into
Yes.
this larger framework.
Yes.
As the state was establishing a sort of overall way of monitoring
yes.
compliance with the targets that the state has set for utilities. Is that-
Absolutely. The
and-
investor-owned utilities make up about 80% of the state, and they report to the PUC, so they have that information. What they lack is that last 20%. So in order to make sure the state's meeting their targets, they're requiring us to submit that. They will monitor those. They can review
Yeah, because
and comment.
that was my sort of, so we submit this, so this is something that they review, they're looking at technical information. They could actually, not that we would fall short because we're so far ahead of benchmarks, but they could actually comment negatively on IRPs if they didn't meet if they weren't calculated to meet the state's targets or requirements.
That's
I'm
correct.
just curious.
That's
Yes?
correct.
Okay.
Yes, it's to ensure compliance with SB 350 to make sure that we've met all the requirements of that, and they can comment on that.
Okay.
They don't have approval authority for the document, but they can comment on it.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So I'm going to introduce Mr. Joe Romalo. He's going to continue on and describe our outreach and clean energy future.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to take just a step back and use one of the slides that Eric showed, really to provide a framework. Since 2012, we've been doing outreach on the IRP, now the Strategic Long-Term Resource Plan. And also in the last 2 rate cases, we really had to wrap our arms around this department, both from the water and the power side, in order to tell a story that made sense of these rather complex processes. And through that rate case, the most recent one, as well as the prior one, we really came up with some foundational storytelling ability about this power supply transformation. We're really creating a clean energy future for Los Angeles. The key in telling that is we take these complex reports and studies and such and translate them into materials like this, which I'll be happy to provide copies with you for you today. And you may have seen the briefing book is another example of that, where we really explain our commitment to clean energy, our progress that we've made so far, the planning processes that are involved, as well as our focus on reliability and the challenges that we face in meeting these mandates and these goals that we have through the mayor's plan as well. It's akin on the power supply planning side to what we're doing on the water side, which is investing in local water supply development while also replacing aging infrastructure and keeping rates competitive for our customers. So that's really the framework. And in that document and through those processes, we tell a consistent story about creating this clean energy future for Los Angeles through investing in renewable energy, energy efficiency, expansion of EVs, demand response, and the benefit of that for our customers, greenhouse gas emission reduction. So this is just an example of one document that we've used in our public outreach to be able to make sense of these complex planning processes on both the water and power side. Again, just an example of what we're dealing with right now. In the past, we really were focused on the power system IRP, as well as occasionally on rate cases. Right now, on the power side, it is complex and it's difficult to understand. So we're making sense of this sausage making really through these various advisory processes and studies that the power system is doing to eventually flow into our strategic long-term resource plan. So right now, we currently have the ones through cooling study that you're going to hear about next, the transmission study that goes into the power supply planning and the SLTRP, as well as the 100% renewable energy study, which I think you've heard of and participated in some of those meetings for some of you. That process has been a really good one for us, partnering with the experts that have been brought in to assist in walking a really diverse group of stakeholders through the planning process. And I'm going to explain how we're going to make that group even larger and a part of our SLTRP process next. For engagement, it's easy to ask, well, how can you get 4 million people excited and interested in what you're doing on the power supply planning side? The simple answer is you can't. However, the issue is opportunity to engage. We have really in-depth, 2 levels really of engagement. We have engaged stakeholders on the environmental side, on the business side, on the neighborhood council side, through whether it's the alliances or the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, for example. We have the Chambers of Commerce, the ratepayer advocate, who want to get to understand our business, want in-depth briefings. In some cases, it may just be a 20 or 30-minute presentation at a neighborhood council meeting. In other cases, it might be a 3-hour session or half a day like we've been holding on the 100% advisory group meeting and with the stakeholder group for the SLTRP. The other issue is general audiences. There are 99 neighborhood councils throughout the city. We are not able to get to them every month, but we make information available to them. We also use social media and did so in the 2016 IRP to really make it accessible to people if they want to either weigh in with comments on the plan or if they want to watch a webinar, which we're going to have in this planning process with the SLTRP, or just comment and send in comments to the board and to the department. There's also homeowners associations, and we get briefings requested from time to time by various groups. So it's really on 2 levels, in-depth, informed stakeholders that want to understand your business, as well as others that we just want to let them know what we're doing, and if they want to participate, we give them the opportunity and the means to do so. Taking a step back on the 2016 IRP outreach, it really was well received and I believe highly regarded. I've heard anecdotally that our IRP processes are far more complex than other departments or other utilities in the state. And it was 159 attendees at 3 workshops. We received numerous comment cards. And when we talk about public workshops, those really are at the culminating point of the outreach because we've worked with a stakeholder group along the way to get their thoughts and input on what we take out to the public and share with them through these public workshops and webinars. This is just an example of what we used in 2016 by way of an invitation, a flyer. This information was also shared on Facebook and Twitter. And our 2018 SLTRP outreach will be modeled after it. This is an example of the comment cards that we got through that 2016 process where people really can rank things, weigh in on the cases that are developed by staff, and provide comments here. We also received letters, in-depth letters, with comments about the IRP through the 16 process. Again, just a couple of examples, the website as well as some fact sheets and information that helps digest and makes it digestible with is otherwise a very technical engineering type report and planning report. I didn't want you to think that while we do the IRP, now the SLTRP outreach every 2 years for the public because of the time it takes to develop that document and the models, we've also gone out recently in the last 8 months to neighborhood councils and other associations and chambers of commerce and presented on this overarching power supply transformation. When we come to them and talk to them about once through cooling, we need these groups to have the context and the framework that we're operating under, which is this huge transition that our department is undertaking on the power planning, on the power supply side. So periodically updating them on the big picture will help us be able to focus on some of the detailed level when we get to with things like once through cooling and the difficult issues involved there. For the advisory group participants for the SLTRP, the Strategic Long-Term Resource Plan, it involves various agencies, city hall representatives, business and chambers, customer groups, neighborhood councils as well. And this is just an example. This slide may be familiar because for the SLTRP process, we're taking the membership of the 100% renewable advisory group, and we're using those representatives as well as additional city hall reps because they participated more in depth on the IRP process in the past. Also, in order to ensure diversity in our invitation we sent out, we're allowing the organizations to designate 2 individuals to represent themselves at meetings, and we've encouraged them to seek diversity in their designees. The outreach timeline, we're really beginning now in December and January to go out and tell people that the SLTRP process is underway and that we're going to come back to them with community meetings and updates. It's really to explain the process and give them some sense and awareness of both the SLTRP as well as the once through cooling report and kind of what it means and how it fits in. Those will be scheduled, as you can imagine. Outreach and stakeholder meetings in December is difficult. For the various neighborhood councils and the chambers and such, that'll begin in December, but probably really most of it will be concluded in January. We'll then have advisory kickoff meetings scheduled for next Tuesday for the SLTRP Advisory Committee. This is the close stakeholder group that will meet here and walk them through the cases and the process for this the new plan. They'll help build case scenarios through additional meetings in January and March. We'll go out to the regional alliances as well as neighborhood councils, as I mentioned. And then we'll have the in-depth workshops in March. There'll be a public comment period, and then the report will be available for review before it's presented to the board for consideration afterward. This is just another example of some of the briefings that have actually already occurred with respect to the ones through cooling, on top of the SLTRP meetings that are occurring. Because we're dealing with, again, multiple planning process, 100% renewables, the ones through cooling, and the strategic long-term resource plan. And we're just trying to keep it as simple and understandable for our customers and our interested stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Questions? Commissioner Broad?
Thank you. Thank you, Joe and Eric. Couple things. Where, I read through this in our packet, where is something redacted? Because normally when something's redacted, it's crossed out. And I don't see anything in our material that is crossed out. It says it's redacted, but what is in fact redacted?
So we have information, depending on where the redaction occurred, that are transmission planning, so it'd be transmission-sensitive information. Exactly where it is in there, I'd have to look at it and point it out, but that would be an example of the redacted info. That answer your question?
But for some reason, you chose not to cross it out.
Cleaner looking if you just say redacted versus put a black line through it.
Yeah.
Again, is there a difference in redaction? I don't know the difference in redaction by saying redacted versus a black marker
Well, it may be cleaner, but it's not as easy to identify
highlight the redaction, yeah.
and understand.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my first question. Second one is, Joe, when you talked about the advisory committee and the participants, when I had looked at the list some time ago, I noticed that there were very few individual neighborhood councils. And as you remember, and I don't want to rehash that, but then Commissioner Funderburk and I were very concerned about that some of the participants that call themselves alliances are really not neighborhood council alliances. And so I wonder where the makeup is of this advisory committee, and what, is it the same that it was a couple of months ago, or have you changed it?
No, there have been additions, and I believe additions that address that concern, including a representative from Valley Alliance and at least one other alliance. The challenge we have with neighborhood councils is by MOU, we have a relationship with the MOU Advisory Committee.
Right.
So therefore, Tony and Jack are both on a part of the group. Beyond that, choosing amongst the 99 to be on a planning process is difficult. So in some cases, because some of the alliances, and you notice I didn't say neighborhood alliances, neighborhood council alliances, some of the alliances, they do represent various groups across the city of homeowners associations. They're loosely knit in some cases. In others, they more strictly adhere to having neighborhood council participants. We really want to encourage as much participation as possible amongst people who are interested. So we welcome the participation of both Tony and Jack, obviously, officially on behalf of neighborhood councils. And if there are alliances or for example, the Valley Alliance would like to designate a representative, we certainly can include them. And in fact, we had 6 or 8 individual groups that had expressed interest in the last 6 months or so or year to join the 100% advisory group, and we've gone ahead and included them. I mean, it can't hurt. Anybody who really wants to be a part of the
Yes.
process can, and we wouldn't exclude them per se, unless somehow there was an imbalance that really resulted as a result of adding
Well,
them.
do you know who has been chosen or appointed from the Valley Alliance of
No.
Neighborhood Councils?
No, I don't, but let me make sure that you receive that invitation, if you
Yeah.
haven't already. It did
Because I'm
go
the
out.
chair of that, and I don't know if.
It did
who's-
go out just last week, and
Okay.
it was before the holidays, so let me make sure that you receive that.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. And I wonder, are we going to be able to see that list of who's on the advisory?
I can
committee?
provide you the list, yes.
That would be
Of
helpful.
the ones we invited, some may obviously opt not to participate, but I can provide you the list of everyone
Okay.
invited.
And a kind of an FYI, we now have 100 neighborhood councils in the city. They just certified the 100th.
Wow, well, that makes it easier to remember. It was 97 for a while.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we now have a neighborhood council from Westwood. Okay. Let's see. And once again, I'd like to offer the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils. We represent the entire San Fernando Valley, which is 34 neighborhood councils, real neighborhood councils, if you'd like to make a presentation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment, actually. Thank you, Commissioner Barrett, for igniting the conversation on transparency and inclusion. And as I think there has been a lot of conversations about the cohort of folks that sit on these advisory boards, and as we strive to be more transparent and more inclusive here at the department, I really want to see just more people included, and not just organizations that have access, and not just some neighborhood councils, but if we're going to include neighborhood councils, we got to include all 100 neighborhood councils. Not just some, not just mine, not just theirs, but all of them. I also worry that for a lot of other reasons that would be lengthy for me to describe here, the representatives of the groups that come to the advisory board are oftentimes don't look like the makeup of Los Angeles. And that's a whole other complex conversation that we can have of why the environmental groups are looking more white than of color. We can have that off record here, but I also want to see more people of color represented in these groups. People of color and just other people in general, not just people of color, but everyone that paid the bill every month, not just who represents them in their apartments or in their neighborhood councils or such, but I want to see real people also invested here. And I think it's important, for example, we don't have translators. We don't have, a lot of these meetings are not in other languages. More than 50% of this city speaks at least Spanish. You can go on with Korean, you can go with a lot of other languages. So I really want to see that in how we envision these groups and align with the city to try to make them more inclusive. We have a tool, we have the equity metrics, and I think that sometimes we forget that we have it. So I would like to also see that. And in addition, I think that we have a lot of avenues you have shown in your presentation for folks to participate when we partnered up with organizations and such. I want to see just plain old school town hall meetings in neighborhoods where people, this stuff that we're deciding here, and I'm especially referring to the 100% study advisory group, because it's so selective. And I had gotten emails from academia, from other organizations saying, how can I participate? And they can, because we have a very strict, we have a very strict group of who can integrate or not. And I don't think that's equity, and I don't think that's even equality. And I think that if we really want to make this something a little more accessible and transparent, we have to include everyone, not just those that can make it or have a stake on it. Thank you guys for your presentation. It was wonderful.
Do you have any?
I just want to add to that. When you said that 2 people will be chosen from each group, did you mean each individual neighborhood council or each alliance of neighborhood councils?
There will be two designees from any of the organizations that are represented on the stakeholder group. For the neighborhood council specifically, the
Yeah.
way that we would work to offer this is through the MOU committee, through Tony Wilkinson and Jack, to send out an email to them, and we can echo it as well, letting them know that they're welcome to attend and participate in the process. I think it's the most open way to do it.
Right.
And then they're welcome to join. It would be the way to do it. From the neighborhood councils, and to encourage diversity in their appointments. Honestly, as long as we've got a room big enough, the more people who want to participate in this, the better. So, I don't know that we would limit it, say 1 or 2 to them, but that they're welcome to send a representative to it. It
Yeah.
always helps to have a second designee, because if somebody can't make a
Yes.
meeting, the other person can. That doesn't diminish one or distinguish one role from the other. They would just both be a part of the process. What's difficult for staff to handle with, which we try to sort of buffer, is if a group sends a 3rd person or a 4th person to each meeting, then there's no continuity, and the input is difficult to get from them. So we try to at least say, if you're going to participate, and we'd like you to, name 2 people so that we know who to expect and that they can communicate with each other and stay up to speed on with what we're presenting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I think when you come to our group, the Valley Alliance, you can explain that
Sure.
to people, because I think that you're going to get some people who will definitely want to participate.
I just wanted to comment first. Thank you for your presentation. This was very helpful. And also, as we discussed during the briefing, that it's important, and you did begin to lay it out, that we think, that we're thoughtful about the manner in which we're soliciting participation, and also the forum, because not every single meeting or forum is suitable or conducive to the way in which various stakeholder groups want to engage. And so as you went through your presentation, I was happy to see that there's sort of stratus, so that you can secure and solicit meaningful engagement in a manner that is appropriate to the various categories of groups. And I know that, first, to your initial comment, outreach in the city of Los Angeles is complicated. And also, when you start to think about what engagement looks like, it's not, there are messages that are sort of messages that are very general, very, very bite-sized, that are going to be broadly distributed. You're going to have very technical conversations that will not be appropriate for, just because, they don't provide for meaningful opportunity to understand and engage for general public. You have a whole different sort of piece as it relates to neighborhood councils, and it's not one size fits all even in that context. You may have a highly organized network in one part of the city, a more diffuse way of engaging in other parts. And so I appreciate the extent to which you're able to think about that and then devise outreach efforts that make sense for each group, and just want to kind of encourage that you're continuing along those lines. And it also gives us a way of evaluating engagement that's realistic as it relates to what our goals are, and then sort of measuring what we achieve against those specific goals. So I did want to just point that out. Also, with respect to the redaction, in the report itself, pages 40 through I think 44 were the ones that are all blacked out. So that's the it's in the actual plan that's being proposed to be submitted, as opposed to in our report. And I appreciate the briefing with respect to the redacted information as well, and certainly want to say thank you for this second bite at the apple in terms of helping me to appreciate what we're doing here. So appreciate it and thank you.
Thank you very much. Really nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you. 8B went through cooling update. We
Excuse me,
have.
Commissioner? Do we
yeah.
want to vote on that? That was an item that we deferred pending the presentation.
Oh, correct. Okay. This is item 17.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion?
I move that we move approval of item 17.
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
It's passed. Thank you, council. We have 4 speaker cards. Do you want to present first or hear from the speakers first? Let's hear from the speakers.
Okay. The first speaker, 8B, is Andrea Rojas. And please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Andrea Rojas. I am the Program Coordinator for Sierra Club. So we appreciate the opportunity to comment on the ones through cooling study and also appreciate LADWP thinking through the repowering of these gas plants at a time when there is a strong desire from the public for clean energy solutions. California is on track to be powered by 100% clean energy by 2045, and LADWP has a unique opportunity to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and build towards a clean energy future. With recent reports showing that fossil fuels such as gas threaten our health and economy, being a climate leader is critical for energy decisions that will shape the future of our communities for decades to come. We will be following the study's progress closely, and we look forward to working with you to develop clean energy solutions for the city of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Kendall Asuncion. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Kendall Asuncion, and I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity to provide our perspective on the once-through cooling study. We applaud LADWP for evaluating different options and even helped secure the extended deadlines for these repowerings. However, with the rapidly approaching deadlines, it is crucial that we proceed in the most cost-effective way to ensure system reliability for business and residential customers alike. Neither Scattergoods nor Harbor have viable alternatives for repowering with all renewable and battery storage. There isn't sufficient land in basin to build required renewables, nor is there sufficient time for all new projects to clear CEQA requirements. I will reiterate that the Chamber urges you to pursue the alternative that is most cost-effective, meets the deadlines without sacrificing reliability or affordability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Armando Flores.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Armando Flores with the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA. We represent over 400 businesses and nonprofits in the San Fernando Valley and all across Los Angeles. As a business organization, we are not opposed to reducing emissions. We do, however, become very anxious when the ability to operate a business in Los Angeles is jeopardized in order to reach compliance. Supporting clean energy is a laudable goal, but we need to consider the most feasible approach that does not jeopardize reliability and affordability. Low-cost, reliable energy is necessary for our economy to continue robust growth and for families to have access to affordable rates. We need to ensure we avoid increasing rates for residents and businesses. Experts know that 100% renewable energy is simply not feasible without increasing those rates for small businesses and families, and we urge you to consider those impacts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Jack Humperville.
My name is Jack Humperville. I'm affiliated with the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council. We had a couple of slides up there that sort of make my point. In the first presentation, they talked about the three pillars of the energy future. One is safe and reliable electric service, reliability. The second was environmental stewardship, and the third was competitive rates. Yet, as you'll see on page 33, when they of the upcoming discussion, you'll see that the environmental impacts are 45% of the equation, development risk is 40%, and costs are only 10%. And I think that's out of balance. I think we're supposed to be equal pillars. I think the cost side should have a much stronger impact. I think the other thing here is on the presentation that was made subsequent to the 100% renewable meeting, we were told that the recommendations that were being made were canned. And it seemed to me that the department and the political process are cooking the books here, and that the consultants had already come up with some recommendations and they were found not to be suitable. So I'd like to get a better understanding of what the initial recommendations are and where they're going. This does not seem to be fair. It's not respecting the ratepayers. 10% is totally unacceptable. Thank you.
That was the last card for 8B.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, gentlemen, proceed.
Eric Montag, Strategic Initiative and Resource Development. I'm here to briefly discuss how we got to this point where we're given this study. So I'm going to give you a little background to where we're at. Prior to 2010, let me get my slides going here. There we go. So first, what is one-stroke cooling? One-stroke cooling is the process of taking cooling water, whether it be from an ocean, a lake, a big, large body of water, running it through our cooling systems, and discharging it back into the same or different body of water, elevated in heat. We've been doing this process from the time we built these stations 60 years ago. In 2010, though, the State Resources Board adopted a policy that eliminated once-through cooling. It set compliance dates for utilities along the California coast, not just DWP, to abide by getting all our generating units off ocean cooling or shut them down. DWP has been repowering prior to that 2010. We've had Harbor once-through cooling and Haynes once-through cooling, and we repowered very simple cycle plants with a combined cycle, more efficient, but they required ocean cooling. Also prior to this, we did a valley repowering. I just have it up there for note. It is a repowering project that we did. After 2010, after this 2010 compliance date came out, DWP changed their repowering strategy to eliminate the ocean cooled, and we have completed 2 projects, one at Scattergood and one at Haynes, that have taken us off of ocean cooling. So again, we finished 2 before ocean cooling. We replaced them with ocean cooling. We did 2 other ones after the policy. They are off ocean cooling. In 2011, we negotiated with the State Water Board less aggressive compliance dates, just because of the reliability aspect of trying to change our strategy to repower. And in that process, we came up, so the table up there summarizes the initial repowering, the initial compliance dates for each of the plants that we were going to repower with ocean cooling. 2015 was Scattergood, 2019 at Haynes, and 2020 for Harbor. In 2011, those dates were renegotiated and pushed out to 2024 for Scattergood and 2029 for Haynes and Harbor. In June of 2017, LADWP announced a pause to our repowering as a response to concerns from our advocacy groups, environmental groups. And we initiated a third-party reliability study. This study brought in consultants that have worked with DWP system before. They did all the analysis. We told them we would like to, we want them to study the reliability of replacing all repowering, some of the repowerings in combinations with non-emitting sources. And you'll get more information on that, but this was a task that DWP sent out and brought these consultants in. The main emphasis of the study was, if we replace the repowering, first of all, do we need to? And if we do, which non-emitting sources would be applicable to replace it and still maintain the same level of reliability that we have today. You'll hear more details on this. I'm just kind of giving you the quick background. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wang and Mr. Morrow and let them talk about their study and their findings.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for letting us provide this update to you. We provided a previous update about 5 months ago, and this is further information. So here's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to cover the scope, methodology, our funnel process, final cases, and our metrics. And then I'll turn it over to Don for key insights and recommendations. So just a quick review. This was a third-party independent study where we're evaluating alternatives to LADWP's 2016 IRP repowering plan. And we're evaluating all non-emitting proven alternatives. We are adopting and expanding on the 2016 IRP recommended case. And one example of that is that we adopt the 2016 IRP load profile with 580,000 EVs. And then we're adding another 160 megawatts of load for the Port of LA electrification and another 75 megawatts of load for the LAX expansion. And so we look at the costs associated with these various alternatives, and we provide key takeaways and recommendations. This is a brief overview of our organization chart. I'm representing Worley Parsons. We are the prime contractor with LADWP, and Don Morrow represents Navigant. He's the main study manager. All of these firms on this page have done work with the department, and we're familiar with this system. This next slide shows the current existing once-through cooling units. On the left-hand side, we've got Scattergood, Haynes, and Harbor. And the OTC compliance dates, as Eric had mentioned, are on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is the IRP repowering plan that was put on hold. And so these are the plants that we are evaluating in this study. As you can see, there's 4 of the 5 repowering units are at 337 megawatts of net dependable capacity. Harbor has a slightly smaller repowering capacity of 245 megawatts. So we looked at the information that was given to us on the current repowering strategy, and we devised study scenarios A through J, to look at the various combinations of repowerings, some that would get retired or repowered. And we took a systematic approach from 0 retired capacity, which is the 2016 IRP recommended case, and increased it all the way up to scenario J, which is all units being retired at 1661 megawatts. And so we looked at what do we replace these repowering plans with. And so we looked at resource alternatives, mainly renewables, storage, DER, and transmission. And next we looked at system reliability, and this is our funnel methodology. System reliability has many different facets, and what we looked at are many different lenses. And as certain cases pass through these layers of the funnel, we find the most feasible or optimal cases. And so we look at resource adequacy, making sure that there's enough generation to keep the lights on, technical feasibility, transmission reliability, to make sure that there's enough capacity in the wires. And we also look at system simulation to look at cost and environmental benefits over the 20 years. We've looked at operability analysis and implementation, making sure that the department can actually build these projects and implement these customer programs in time by those OTC compliance dates. And then we look at the portfolios and we start to rank them based on strategic and measurable metrics. So we take the last 3 slides and we come up with this framework to come up with a logical and methodical way to evaluate the whole universe of options. And so we have scenarios A through J from the left to the right on the columns. And then we've got the resource alternatives from top to bottom, rows 1 through 14. And the resource alternatives are typically in a increasing complexity order, where the resource alternatives that are closer to the top are easier to implement and develop. And then we've got our funnel process up on the upper left-hand corner. Okay, Okay, so as we step through the different layers of the funnel, we'll start seeing more feasible and optimal options bubble to the top. And so we first look at resource adequacy, and as we can see, we've studied a whole slew of options. Renewables energy only in rows 1 and 2 can meet system reliability up to a certain point. And as you retire more than 460 megawatts of repowerings, then we don't meet resource adequacy. And so those cells go red. And the main reason is that there are transmission upgrades that are needed in order to support increasing amounts of renewables. And then we look at technical feasibility, and we see that more cells are no longer feasible just because there's a limited amount of space within the LA basin to build all the renewables that are needed for system reliability. You need alternative forms of energy or alternatives in order to make system reliability. Okay. And so next, it's important to note that in every single scenario, there are still cases that are still under evaluation that are feasible and valid. And what we looked at were identifying 12 key cases in order to dive more into detail with our transmission reliability, system simulation, and operability analysis. And so we selected these 12 cases, Roman numeral 1 through 12, to look at in further detail. It's important to note that in cases 1 through 5, we're replacing repowerings with mainly energy storage. It's a dispatchable form of energy, and we are able to, it's relatively more simple to implement and to procure and design.
I'm sorry, can I just ask you a quick question going back to slide 15, row 5? I just don't understand what it's sort of, it just says transmission down,
That's
and then the entire row is red. So just to help me understand what that indicates, so I know why that's red.
Yeah, so row 5 represents replacing repowerings with transmission only. And so we've seen that the IRP has done a good job in terms of planning new energy resources to come online onto the system. And so you're meeting your load just perfectly, right? But with just transmission being added while taking away the repowering gas assets, you no longer can meet resource adequacy.
Yeah, thank you. I just wasn't quite sure what that piece was.
Not a great question. Okay, so moving back to the 12 cases.
Can I just stop you on that same chart?
It's sort of like, okay.
I don't want to belabor it because I'm familiar with where you're going here, but below line 5, on lines 6 through 14, the way I read it, it suggests all of these alternatives pass resource adequacy requirements, which are inconsistent with lines 1 and 2, solar wind, and geothermal, starting at E and going through J, don't pass resource adequacy requirements. So logically, I don't understand how, if those two don't, how the other 9 or so do.
Yeah, another good question. So the main difference between the first 4 rows and 6 onward is that it has energy storage combined with renewables. And so when you look at a pure renewables play, there's, when the sun stops shining and the wind stops blowing, it's difficult to meet system reliability that way. But when you pair it with energy storage, as in rows 6 onward, then you have a viable solution.
Well, that energy storage you only have in 6 through 2. Well, I'm sorry, 6 through 2. You don't have it in 11 and 12.
Yeah, or transmission. I apologize.
So energy storage provides that much of a cushion that compensates for items E through J in items 1 and 2?
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of energy storage is kind of like allowing the sun to shine at night.
Yeah, provided there's that much energy storage, but.
Right,
okay.
Correct.
exactly. There's that much capacity
Right.
and,
Right.
yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. So the 12 cases, we've seen that there are, we can meet repowerings with energy storage only through cases 1 through 5. But when we're looking at larger amounts of retirements, we need to layer on further resources in addition to the energy storage in order to provide more effective solutions. So in case 6, we're looking at energy storage plus solar, energy efficiency, and demand response. And we call that an inflection point between case 5 and 6. And then similarly with case 7 to 8, we also see another inflection point where we need to add on wind, geothermal, and transmission. And so again, it's important to note that every single scenario has at least one case that we're being studied. And in certain cases, scenarios F, G, and J, we've got multiple cases being studied. This next slide shows the same 12 cases in a different format. It shows that the gas that's being retired in the second column is being replaced with the resources on the third column. So for example, case 1, we were retiring 245 megawatts at Harbor and replacing that with energy storage. What we wanted to also show is that through our iterative runs, we saw that cases 1 through 4, with just a pure energy storage only solution, did not meet environmental goals, where we were actually seeing the greenhouse gas actually increase. And what we needed to do was include more renewables. So those cases 1 through 4 moved down from row 3 down to row 10 to include that extra renewables. And those would be renewable power purchase agreements. So what do these 12 cases look like in terms of a resource build-out and capacity build-out? And so here we have the 12 cases, 1 through 12 from top to bottom. And this is the makeup of the capacities, the assets that would need to be brought online. And so we see the decreasing amount of gas repowerings from case 1 through 12. The first case being, at the top, the IRP recommended case at 1635 megawatts of gas being repowered. And then moving on down with less gas being repowered, but being made up with different types of resources. So one example is case 3, where we have 1 unit Haynes being retired. We're replacing that with 437 megawatts of energy storage in the blue and about 2 miles of transmission upgrades in basin. Okay, and then another example is case 12, where there's no gas being repowered, but we need 1,800 megawatts of energy storage, 600 megawatts of in-basin solar, 250 megawatts of geothermal, over 100 miles of external transmission outside of the basin, another over 200 miles of in-basin transmission upgrades, and then we also need energy efficiency and demand response.
So slide 20 is simply laying out the scenario to get to reliability.
Correct.
Without an overlay with respect to technical feasibility. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've looked at technical feasibility in terms of a space and a development standpoint. What we haven't looked at yet is the constructability, and you'll see that in the next couple slides where building it out.
That's right. They're two different things. Yeah. No, I get that. So without any perspective regarding implementation,
exactly,
the actual execution of the strategy. Right. So this is looking at what would be required in order to meet the reliability standard under all 12 scenarios, without reference to then, if we were going to execute 1 versus 12, they're very different. You have very different considerations.
Yeah, you've got it. And you'll see that in the next couple slides.
Okay,
great.
Thank you.
It's a great lead-in. Okay. So looking at the implementation risks on the next slide, this is what Commissioner McLean-Hill alluded to. where we've got transmission project challenges with CEQA. We've got long project durations, land acquisitions, community impacts. We see a lot of transmission upgrades being needed on the west side of the San Fernando Valley and Mid-City. And then we've also seen challenges in our models with energy storage. There's a limited amount of space on the current LADWP sites. And just for perspective, you need about 1.6 acres for a 100 megawatt energy storage block. And that's about 1.25 football fields. And then there's still uncertainty around fire safety codes, environmental permitting, building permits, noise permits. We've even heard that nearby energy storage installation has been having trouble getting their fire permits. And then, of course, there's chemical disposal at the end of life. That's also an issue with energy storage. We also see issues with energy efficiency and demand response achievability. The 2016 IRP already has aggressive goals with energy efficiency and demand response, and we are, in our model, asking for even more participation in energy efficiency and demand response. And predicting that participation is difficult, and there's also a disproportionate participation across the customer base. We've also seen issues with geothermal resource access. There's limited availability. Transmission to those resources is also difficult. And then we've also seen in-basin solar challenges. Next, the last layer in our funnel is really around the metrics. And so we have, on our next 4 slides, we'll see 4 major categories of metrics. We've got environmental impact metrics, development risk, organizational metrics, and cost. And so you'll see in these next 4 slides where we look at these outputs from our models and how they are, how we take those into account in our scoring. So first off, looking at our environmental benefits, we mainly looked at CO2 emissions and natural gas usage. The bar charts on the bottom represent the CO2 emissions. The 2016 IRP has roughly just under 6 million tons of GHG emissions by 2026. And this is already way below the 1990 emissions level of 17.9 million tons. And so the green bars represent the 12 cases that we've evaluated. And the general trend is that as you repower less, you'll have less GHG emissions, and same with natural gas usage. Looking at our development risks, we wanted to at least look at implementation risk, technology risk, and outage scheduling risk to look at what are the risks of implementing, designing, building, and getting these projects in service. And so we've outlined these across the 12 cases. And the general trend, again, is that as you bring on more of these new technologies and have so many more projects to build out in a short time frame, you have a higher risk around implementation. Energy storage right now, with so much being needed to be brought online, is also a key risk. Energy storage is being developed, but not at the scale that we need it. So a 100 megawatt energy storage block has not yet been implemented and brought online within the US, and we're asking for 1,800 megawatts. There's also outage scheduling that's also a major risk.
So essentially, if you look from 7 below, it's just all flashing red lights.
It's a high risk, correct. We also wanted to look at, from an organizational perspective, we looked at the business processes, the organizational structure, the decision making within the department, and to kind of move into more of these new technologies, having more distributed energy, having so many assets on the system. There's going to be, again, higher risk with more of these new technologies.
So tell me a little bit about that. I don't understand as it relates to, because once you get to that page, from an organizational risk perspective, we're down to the top 3. So explain to me, with respect to 4, 5, and 6, what the medium risk designation is meant to
Right. So 4, 5, and 6 are kind of in the medium risk. What we've seen is that you will still have the dispatchable generation that and the assets that are centralized, similar to how the department has planned for resources in the past. And there's a limited amount of new technologies that are being brought online. And so while there is that change in the organization that's needed, we find that it's manageable and there's only medium risk there. Whereas when you have, so many more transmission lines, so many more energy storage and different types of technologies that are coming online, then there's higher risk there.
So,
I can add on a little bit more to that. So one of the things that you're facing here in California is SB 100, which is a 2042 100% renewable deadline. LA has done a fantastic job with their IRP, and then they're looking at this, which would go above and beyond that and accelerate that even faster. One of the things that our study would do is if you eliminated all of the natural gas, you would be accelerating that timeline quite a bit. And so what we're trying to do is weigh the requirements that LA needs to fit for something like SB 100 and the timeline that's laid out versus accelerating that timeline and then the changes to the organization that needs to be dealt with in order to make that. We realize those changes have to be made at some point. The risk we're looking at is the acceleration of that and the kind of the impacts to the decision making, the training of the staff, the equipment that needs to be bought, all of those things that kind of go into how a utility operates. We're trying to understand, or we tried to assess and help you understand the impacts of these alternatives. So that's the driver for that.
and as between, I get low risk, what is medium risk? From your perspective, what is that meant to signal or convey? I get red is flashing red light, good God, don't do that. But what is yellow, especially again as it relates to, and David, you may have something to say about this, but literally as it relates to, because this seems to be an assessment of from an internal capacity, just a business and people capacity, right? So
yes, correct.
what does that?
Yeah, what Ben has laid out here is that right around case 4 through case 6, you're at a transition stage. Before those, you're eliminating with these alternatives one of the repowering projects. We're looking at 5 repowering projects. And so 1 through 4 eliminates one of them in various locations. So what's happening here is now we're starting to say, let's eliminate more than one, which means you have to bring in more and more resources. As you start to bring in a lot more energy storage or bring in a lot more PV, or we start to rely on energy efficiency, those things endure more, and again, above and beyond the IRP. That results in more change. And so our yellow indicator here is a transition period where we know that they're going to have to start changing their processes faster and become more aggressive at it, but it's not as severe or aggressive as, say, eliminating all of the natural gas and going all in on case 11 and 12.
Okay, because I guess what I'm looking at, or just, and I'll be done with this, is on slide 25, an implementation or development risk assessment that is all hardware related.
Correct. How can you get it built?
And then on which, gets me, let's say which gets me, say, 5, right? Or scenario 5, where I've got 2 greens and a yellow, using your scale. But then I flip to the next page, and from an organizational capacity perspective, I'm looking at a chart that says, we're good 1 through 3. Once you move beyond 3, we start to stress the organization in some form or fashion.
Right.
And I'm just trying to reconcile what all of that means as it relates to any ultimate
Right. I think
adoption of recommendation, because, and the extent to which the organizational risk assessment is a constraint that has meaningful implications for the technical side of what we might do.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to understand 25 versus 26 is 25 is all processes are worked out, all the training is done, all the equipment is there, but now you still got to build it. You've got to get the right of way, you've got to make sure the technology is there, all of those things. 26 is getting to that level. Your processes are worked out, your staff is trained, your equipment is there. And then I think the easiest way to maybe understand a little bit of that assessment is if you eliminate all of that natural gas that currently exists at Scattergood, Haynes, and Harbor, there's a lot of staff that are currently operating that equipment. So if that equipment goes away, there's a lot of retraining that needs to be done in order for them to shift over to, say, maintaining batteries, servicing PV equipment, working on transmission and the like. So that's what we're trying to capture.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say something similar. I don't think I can add it and make it better.
Okay, thank you.
And looking at the next slide, this is the last output of our metrics, is looking at the total cost. So we looked at everything from a net present value standpoint, where the 2016 IRP recommended case is at 15 billion net present value. And the cases 1 through 12, where you see the pluses, are in addition to that 15 billion. And so Don will cover it a little bit later, but we're looking at, for example, case 12, it's approximately 4 billion greater than the IRP recommended case at 19 billion.
So thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to present. Ben has gone through our methodology, the alternatives that we've come up with that we've compared and contrasted both against themselves as well as the 5 units that are currently on hold that Eric talked about. And what I'm going to be doing is going through our findings from the study, some of the insights that we've gathered, and then how we use that to come up with our recommendation. One of the important things to note is our study is not an aspirational study. Our study is a reliability-based study, and if there was a decision to implement this, we need to make sure that the lights stay on and work by the time period related to the combined cycle timings. The compliance deadlines are hard and fast, and so we need to make sure that these can be built and installed in that time. Just to kind of recap some of the overall high-level items that we observed, is solar and wind alone just simply isn't enough to satisfy the resource adequacy objectives. You need to pair it up with something. We also found the same with energy storage. Ben alluded to it on his slide where we saw the dotted lines drop down. We needed to both add some transmission to support the charging of the energy storage, and we also had to pair it up with renewable PPAs. Now, the reason for that is if you don't manage your charging and require that the charging energy comes from renewable energy sources, then by the California rules, you have to consider that as if it was charged from a natural gas unit, whether or not you actually did. So we found that you had to pair up the energy storage with the renewable to get the environmental benefit, which was the main objective of this study. We also saw that the number of transmission upgrades increased with the higher levels of non-emitting alternatives. Again, we're talking 5 units. And as we start to eliminate more and more of those, we start to see more transmission required. Again, primarily driven by the charging impacts. The utilization of the remaining non-OTC gas units. So as you eliminate the gas and look at non-emitting alternatives, those start to have to work more and harder because they're the remaining fleet on the system, and the operators have to call on them more. So you're going to be using older units that are less efficient to operate the system. All the cost estimates are more expensive than the 2016 IRP repowering plan. So there is, as Jack pointed out, a cost issue that needs to be addressed. And then finally, there's an increasing complexity of the resources. And that risk, we talked about organizational change. There were other items that we noted that we didn't actually factor into the study, but are important to point out. Diversity of resources. That gives you more entry points into the electric system of LA. And things like cybersecurity have to be taken into account. Oh, I got it done.
Okay.
I think I can do it. I can. All right. So I've got a few slides now on our observations with respect to the actual locations. There were 5 units that we talked about. And for these slides, it's important to note the following. 3 of those units are located at the Haynes substation. So 3 of the 5 are all at Haynes. There's 1 unit at Scattergood, and there's 1 unit at Harbor, okay? So from a Haynes repowering assessment, our study showed that the best opportunity to replace some or all of the repowering projects is at Haynes. And this is because, again, there's 3 units, so that gives you an opportunity to achieve relatively high levels of environmental performance if you choose to go a non-emitting route. Haynes is also at a pretty strong point on the electric system. So there's an opportunity to eliminate a few of these units without having a need for transmission reinforcement. Also, the development risk at Haynes are the best managed. It has a lot of site space available to it, so if you choose not to put in the combined cycle unit, replace it with energy storage and other resources, there is space available to do that. Site access and the timing as well is, it works to its favor. The compliance date for Haynes is 2029, so it gives you a chance to work out some of the development risks. Costs are also, again, if we focus only on Haynes, moderately higher than the IRP. Our study showed that you could replace 2 projects at Haynes, and you would only incur about a 10% cost impact over the IRP. Let's go to the next one. Harbor. Now, Harbor is the smallest of the 5 units, okay? So Harbor does have some potential to have that combined cycle replaced. We note that it's a critical location on the system, and it's necessary to support the Port of LA electrification and large industrial customers. Because it's the smallest unit, it has the least environmental impact, okay? So, we're not seeing a big bang for the buck with respect to CO2 reductions. There is also limited space on the site for energy storage. So while it's an opportunity perhaps to replace it in kind with some energy storage, there's not an opportunity at Harbor to host a lot more other resources. Also, Scattergood and Harbor happen to be in a spot on the electric system that's weak. So while we think we can make minimal transmission upgrades to make Harbor work, if we brought Harbor in combination with any other site, and in particular Scattergood, the amount of transmission upgrades go up significantly. It's a cost-effective site, though, primarily because we're dealing with the smallest of the units. And then finally, Scattergood. We see most of the risk associated, the highest risks associated with this at Scattergood. It's a critical location on the system. It's necessary to support LAX expansion and local reliability. Now, the compliance deadline is earlier with Scattergood. So we do see good environmental performance if you were to replace that. because that would have to be replaced by 2024, and you would get 5 more years of environmental CO2 reduction associated with that site. However, there are the development risks that we found, and they are the highest that we've seen in the system. So there's regulatory and permitting risks, and that is primarily related to the real estate acquisition. We see that site is there's not enough on-site land available that LA has under its control. So we would need to have you go out and acquire new property. And then there's also the need for the technology to develop. So we're going to be using, if we look at Scattergood and replace it, we would call on energy storage. And the 100 megawatt blocks are still being worked on and developed. So we would be trying to use that technology the earliest possible. So there's not that time there for having that work itself out. And I also noted the transmission-related issues. Should point out that Scattergood alone, though, is a cost-effective location. It's still more expensive than the IRP if we went with the versus the combined cycle, but it is the most cost-effective case alone if you only replaced 1 unit. Those costs could go up dramatically, though, because of the development delays that you could see with it. All right. So let's take a look at the resource levels with all of these alternatives. I'm not going to dwell on this. I know it's a very technical and number-oriented slide. The important point is that there's a lot of good stuff happening in the yellow bar in the IRP. So the IRP calls for energy storage. You can see it in the third column. It calls for in-basin solar. It calls for 500 megawatts of demand response, a bunch of energy efficiency, wind, and geothermal. Anything we do is going to be over and above those amounts. So any of our recommendations that we would give you would say we're going to add on to those levels. So it's going to be over and above that. Now, the other thing to point out, and I don't think we quite emphasize this enough, all 12 of these projects, or all 12 of these alternatives that we looked at, achieve equivalent reliability to the 5 repowerings. We designed them that way. We looked for that. It's just the development risk is different for each of them, and the costs are different. So those are the 2 points I wanted to make about that slide. If you have any questions, certainly would be willing to entertain that, or we can come back to it. Now, how do we compare and contrast this? And this brings us to slide 33, and we now come back to our metrics slide and go, where do we go as a team, as a third-party independent team, to give a recommendation back to LA? We know that the major driver of this study is looking at non-emitting alternatives to the combined cycle repowerings. So we know that environmental impact has to be a major part of our assessment. We also know that there's a lot of development risk associated with the construction, with the technology, and so on. You cannot achieve the environmental objectives if you can't get it built, or if the technology doesn't mature in time. So we have to bring that into play as well. Organizational, we talked about that. We need to factor that in. But what we said was we don't want the organizational changes or impacts to drive it. What we want to do is understand how it influences our impact. And so your questions before were right on point. And then costs. So what we've picked, and Jack kind of gave us a heads up a while back, we look at 45% for environmental. We look at 40% for the development risk, 5% organizational, and then we factor in costs at 10%. And we can go back and talk about those if you have any questions. But those are our reasons. Now, we have looked at sensitivities on this as well. So we've moved these around a little bit. And we'll increase environmental, we'll lower environmental, we'll increase development, lower that, increase costs, lower that. And what we find is the answers we're about to show you really don't change. Our recommendations are supported through that. So here's our rankings, and here's what we found using those. We've done 2 rankings. One ignoring costs, so we call that the technical scoring, and then we also factor in costs to try and understand how costs might change that. And what we found is that case 6 was our #1 performing alternative if we ignore costs, and that was eliminating 2 of the units at Haynes. And that is what we found using those metrics. It's a good performance on CO2 reduction, balanced by the development risks to be able to get that installed. And case 5 is one of those inflection points that Ben had talked about. We looked at 2 alternatives to replace those units. And both of the units at Haynes, again ignoring cost, came up as #1. The third best alternative was replacing the unit at Harbor. And then the fourth best was replacing 1 unit at Haynes. Now, when we factor in costs, we get a flip of this. And that's actually not a surprise. So if we factor in costs, then only Harbor looks like the best alternative. But I will note the following, and it's boxed in. I think it's boxed in. That the top 4 in both cases are the same, and that's a strong signal that a recommendation is in there. So our recommendation, based upon this, is case 6. We think that it's a good balance of the CO2 objectives while balancing the development costs, or development risks and the costs. Case 6 eliminated 2 of the units at Haynes, and it kept a repowering at Scattergood, 1 of the repowerings at Haynes, and the repowering at Harbor. And I believe the next slide shows you what we replaced that with. So that's on slide 36. And slide 36 shows how we would implement that. We would be doing 3 energy storage projects. Thanks, Ben. Oops. 3 energy storage projects at Haynes in 3 different locations shown there. We would be recommending the installation of the in-basin solar going in across 4 different zones. We focused the solar installation to help manage the transmission impact, so that's a real targeted design on the solar installations. And then we also feel that there's an opportunity to still get more aggressive on the energy efficiency, as well as the demand response. That's probably the highest risk associated with case 6, because we hear that, in particular, energy efficiency in the IRP is one of the maybe the strongest initiatives that they've got with the most difficulty of hitting. And then the gas repowering is shown there. If we come back, oops, there we go. If we come back to this, this visual that I had, but focus now in on 5 and 6, you can see the reduction of gas capacity shown in column 1, and you can see the increase in resource that we use for case 6 to make up for it. Now, between cases 5 and 6, we looked at 1,257 megawatts of energy storage supported by in-basin solar, wind-based, renewable-based PPA. And then for case 6, we're only looking at 520 megawatts of storage, but it's supported by 300 megawatts of in-basin solar over and above the IRP, additional demand response, and energy efficiency. If you can't hit some of these, and these targets, say the energy efficiency target, what this shows is that you could increase the in-basin storage to help compensate for that. So that's how you would read this. And that was it. Our next steps is after this presentation, we'll be taking into account any feedback and so on, and then working on our report. And our objective is to finalize that report with a write-up of these recommendations by the end of February. So thank you for the opportunity to present this.
And I had
Thank you. This is, you've obviously put a lot of time and effort into a very complex set of subjects and have put it together in a way that is mostly understandable. David?
I just want to, could you go back a couple slides, please? One more. That one. So I did want to say, this isn't the last bite at the apple, even if there is the decision to move forward with Case 6, in that Haynes 17 and 18, basically the second and third piece of this, are far enough out to where we could, at least in a couple years, revisit it to look at, has something come online or has something changed, or the technology become very, very proven in a short period of time. And in fact, especially before Harbor, it would not only could we, but my recommendation is, should we, that we should revisit something like this, because technology does change, and that's essentially about 5 years beyond where any recommendation would come now from this process. Accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Do commissioners have questions, or is everything crystal clear to everybody?
Excuse me, President Levine, I had some
Yes.
comments that might help to the
Good.
discussion. One, I wanted to second what General Manager Wright had to say. Timing's everything. What decision is this board going to be making first? It will be to spend money on a CEQA review of Scattergood. And that's a multi-million-dollar decision that's part of a $100 billion strategy, or $100 million strategy change. So that allows us to step into this. The discussion can be ongoing during that CEQA review as we learn more about this, the CEQA results in that process. So this is not a final decision. Second, we have, as the slide you pointed out, we have into the early to mid-20s to make the next step in this process. So what things offer the least amount of regrets? That's the criteria we started looking at it, because so we are not irrevocably committed to something. And why is this time important? There are two things that are making this more expensive. The cost of storage, and it isn't just battery storage, it's any form of electric power storage is expensive. And anytime I've done a study recently, maybe you have some exceptions now with changing technology, but it's been cheaper to do a gas turbine than to build pumped hydro or compressed air energy storage or battery storage. The generation unit always beats things on costs. So storage cost has the potential to decrease with time. And if our experience with photovoltaic power is any experience, in 6 years we've seen the cost of photovoltaics at the desert level, utility scale, go from about 10 cents to under 2.5 cents. So if we have that kind of progress in storage, everything will be great. We make lots of choices by the mid-20s. But that hasn't happened yet. The other thing that's expensive is in-basin solar has not come down in cost like desert solar. So it's still in the 12 to 15 cent range. Is that similar to your assumptions? So the other problem is in-basin solar is expensive. And how do we get around that? We have to build more transmission, and we know building transmission takes from 5 years to never to get into place. So one footnote, what's not considered here? We've accepted the base integrated resource plan and the existing mix of fossil units as inviolate. And maybe if we're planning on changes in the short term, we may want to select some different technologies for the fossil generation, because A gas turbine or combined cycle has a major overhaul typically in about 10 years. It's a very expensive process. And yes, that's a good time to reconsider what you're doing with that project. But there are even lower capital costs, slightly higher operating cost options in the form of large-scale reciprocating engines that can start faster than gas turbines, so they can be more responsible to renewables, and they're fungible. You can put them on a barge and ship them away. So those are things to be considered. For our ratepayer advocate review of this, we have had an expert embedded with their team working with them. He's from the Brattle Group, and I have known him for almost 20 years doing these kinds of studies. This is a very elaborate, very quick study in this process. And we are assessing the results in detail, and we will report back in greater detail as we get closer to the final report time. But we're trying to give our feedback on what we're thinking we have to say to the team now so they can incorporate ideas in their final report.
Commissioner Noonan.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I find all of your feedback very, very helpful. That being said, we've had so many discussions about the importance of battery storage, energy storage, and I know that the department has been working very closely with MIT, USC, other very prestigious, well-advanced universities. Can you report to us on the progress that they're making to help us in this capacity?
So we are, a meeting or two ago, in terms of energy storage, you approved a project for the JFB BESS. That's a pilot program looking at 2 different battery technologies. We work very closely with EPRI on that to establish that kind of partnership. We also work very closely with our PPA developers, the solar PPA developers, in integrating energy storage into our solar PPAs. So those efforts are there, they're moving, we're learning, we're collaborating, we're partnering. We're doing that to achieve our energy storage mandated goals. What this study talks about are significantly higher amounts of energy storage.
No, I understand that, and I respect that, and I really, really appreciated the beautiful presentation that you obviously spent a lot of time working on. But just to give the board, as well as the ratepayers, some kind of, ETA on, how our progress has been working with MIT to address these issues, not necessarily for this big project, but I mean, this has been a recurring theme at many, many board meetings. So can you just tell us, are these brilliant students finding answers for us?
So
Thanks.
I would ask that I can get back to you to get the latest info. Is that acceptable to the board?
I think it's vital to this department, so I think that all of us would really appreciate to see the progress that has been made.
So let me gather all that and get back to the board. I don't know how you would establish a time frame, 30 days, or it doesn't take much for me to get together with my groups and just get the latest, so you have the latest info.
I think it's vital, and we really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a quick question regarding the OTC requirement at the state level. So I believe and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that for scattergood is on, can you remind me when exactly we need to be in compliance?
December 2024.
Okay, so it's 2024, we're in 2018. Excellent. And what about Haynes and Harbor?
December 2029 for all those 2 plants as well.
Okay. And my question is, through your study, and I know that the time frame is obviously sooner when you're releasing completely your study sometime next year or so, is this accounting new technology and the advancement of things like battery storage and more PV and such, and to meet these requirements on time? Because it seems to me that these recommendations and report done today, I wonder if, given the extent of the time by when we need to be meeting the requirements, if any of these recommendations may change, and if we were to push, giving the recommendations later, if this will allow us to perhaps not repowering with gas so many, any or all of the three of the units, I'm sorry, of the plants.
I would like to bring up Nancy Sutley to discuss, provide more information on that relative to the history. And
Yeah, just to give a little context on the requirement.
Chair over there.
Sorry. Remember that the state board, our order is to eliminate the use of once-through cooling. So the state Water Resources Control Board policy doesn't cover what replaces that. There's a sort of a process that goes along with that, where there's a statewide committee that's made up of energy agencies, the CAISO and others, that review the grid reliability implications of the once-through cooling elimination requirements. So it's kind of a two-step process. So the requirement on DWP is to eliminate once-through cooling at Scattergood by December 31st of 2024, and then we report. So we do this grid reliability report every year, where we talk about our view of the implications of that on grid reliability, and that is then reviewed by this statewide committee. So that question of whether the technology and what the impact of the technology changes, we can have a view of that, but this committee would also have a view of whether that would have should have an impact on the schedule for meeting the once-through cooling elimination requirements. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think my question was more, if we commit to these recommendations in 2018 today or not, and if we decide to wait until maybe 2022, for example, where it's closer to at least the Scattergood deadline, could we potentially avoid repowering plants with gas and maybe power them with new technologies like energy storage and others if we were to account these recommendations at a later date? And I don't know if that will be your job to answer, Nancy.
No, I mean, I just wanted to make sure it's just to, just to kind of be clear that the 2024 deadline is to eliminate once-through cooling.
Of course, I understand
and
that.
So there obviously are implications of whether we make a decision today, tomorrow, and
or
5 years,
yes,
or the day before. But as of right now, the requirement is that switch gets turned off December 31st, 2024.
Commissioner Vasquez, I think I understand your question. We have to start now in order to go through the process to construct Scattergood and have it in place by 2024. If we wait till 2022, we could not have the reliability that we require for our customers. We cannot guarantee that would be in place. We would be relying on the risk that technology would improve over the next 3 years now to provide that additional reliability that we need. So it is a 5-year construction process, and we do have to shut down Scattergood in basically October or December of 2024. So pushing it out increases the risk of kind of a do-nothing alternative for 3 years. And if that's what I was hearing you say, let's not decide on Scattergood for 3 years till 2022.
And I was not suggesting only Scattergood.
No, she said let's not make any decision.
Okay.
My suggestion is all of the three. And also, if we're accounting just on Friday, on Black Friday of all days, the fourth National Climate Assessment was released, where the implications of climate change, I mean, we just saw this just a couple of weeks ago, not even a month ago. in our neighboring cities with the fires and the drought. We continue seeing this, and to me, it's alarming that, I mean, the recommendations are hopeful. I would say they're hopeful. But in a state where we take great pride of our leadership for being innovative and finding ways to meet our needs in a way that is reliable, is cost effective, and also has the environment in mind, I think that there's got to be other ways that we can look at these findings that you have. And I'm sure that this is where the place of innovation maybe is, and creativity, where we can look at how we can best serve the customers that we have, our business community, and the residents of Los Angeles in a way that also meets the needs of nationally and globally on climate. So that's my only concern. I'm hopeful about this report, but I also wanted to know these technologies, the energy storage, I mean, renewables in general are so fast in changing. And sometimes they go down, and sometimes the pricing goes up, and it's like fluctuates, and in a way that's, exciting and is scary, But I don't think that DWP can sit today and tell their customers and the world that they're going to go and repower any other gas plants because we didn't really look at any other alternatives. I mean, we have 12 cases, which is hopeful.
I have a couple of questions. So first, this has been a useful presentation. So some of my questions are just process-oriented. Sure. And one, I thank you for your comments, Dr. Bickle, with respect to your observations relative to the report, and also I appreciate your advising that you are will have additional independent review and feedback on the recommendations, the report and recommendations as they move forward. I'm curious as to how, and again, this is just because, forgive me for not knowing, that the presentation that's being made here is being made by a group of independent experts that have been convened, commissioned, supported, paid for by DWP. Will we be looking at, or are all of our staff perspectives? Will that be? Should I assume that that's incorporated in the document that's being prepared, or the report or recommendation, or is this being done really with data provided to the outside team? They're moving forward, compiling, analyzing, presenting, and the recommendations that are being moved forward are independent of, feedback from staff.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. We set up the contract with the requirement that they had to work with our subject matter experts in all areas of our organization, be it operations, our integrated resource plan, our transmission planning. So when they set up their model, which that model is actually going to be used into our 100% study, so we had to get it right. Mm-hmm. We conducted monthly meetings with staff, with different groups, our distributed energy groups, our planning groups, and they came to us with a download of, we need this info, here you go. And then there was an exchange for a few months where they would come back with questions and our staff would come back with answers, and we tried to get them what they were looking for. So the staff maintained a third party, this is your study, but this is our system, here's the info, here's how we operate, factor that into your study and your assessment. So third party maintained, but we were integrally involved in reviewing their results to say, does this make sense to how we operate if this went out? And I believe you guys did a simulation, correct?
Yeah.
They asked our staff for a historical event I think 2.
Yeah, we use them to calibrate the models, but not control the results. It's our analysis and independent recommendation. But we worked with Eric's team, and Faranac was our boss on this. So we worked with the planning groups, we worked with the IRP groups to use the models, test our assumptions. When we did a study of, when we used our tools to run our analysis, we backcast to make sure that the results were consistent with what LA experts had seen and subject matter experts.
So for instance, so as it relates to things like what's technically feasible, et cetera.
Yeah, we ran all the options.
That's validated in a way that our staff would say we don't have an argument around that aspect of their study.
Yeah, so as Don mentioned earlier, this was not an aspirational study. And that entails that we tasked them to use mature technologies. They could not use pilot programs on a system that we're relying on reliability. So everything that they have, the list of alternatives that you were put up there, they were all considered mature technologies, and our staff concurred. Yeah, there's nothing wild that we're worried about, or we don't know what you're talking about.
And as it relates to system capacity and all of those other factors that would influence the outcome of certain recommendations, I assume that there's at least a common there's a consensus around what that represents, so that as we're looking at those, to the extent that that influenced some of the study analysis, that's something that there was agreement around.
That's correct. So as far as system capacity, you can look at that as both transmission and generation. So they verified our models were capturing the flows on the system and the capacity of the lines correctly, as well as the generators, and vice versa. So when we looked at the 5 repowering cases, one of the questions, you had actually raised a very good question about why did the transmission all drop out all at once? If the system was overbuilt, then we might have found some of those transmission alternatives could actually meet reliability. But that would mean that the system was overbuilt. So we took a look at your original capacity levels, the resource adequacy, that top filter that Ben talked about, and we verified that LA was doing things correctly. You had selected your capacity plan appropriately, and we verified you were consistent with your peers as well. So you met good utility practice. So we looked at yours, and then you looked at ours. And so with respect to, not with respect to the recommendations, but with respect to the underlying models that we used to do our study. That's correct.
All right, thank you very much. And then David, you indicated, both you and I think our ratepayer advocate both were making points around not the potential to refine decisions that might be made today at some point in the future, so that we have sort of just moving forward a little at the point that we are actually called upon to make to adopt a recommendation. We have a sort of planning baseline, but that there is some opportunity as we move forward, should something dramatic happen with respect to new technologies, to refine to make some refinement that might result in an even more favorable sort of implementation plan that than the recommendation that we adopt, I guess, at some point next year. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and in fact, it'll come with my recommendation absolutely to revisit the phase, calling those 3 phases, if you will, 2 and 3. This absolutely needs to be revisited because technology will evolve over the next 3 to 5 years, and we need to make sure we're utilizing the most current technology to ensure that we repower the least amount of greenhouse gas generating
So
uses.
as a part of our planning process, we can factor that as a part of the CEQA review process and the process, the planning process, we can factor in that opportunity so that if it presents itself, we can take advantage of it. But as I understand it, we will need to have at least a base planning scenario that we've adopted that we're moving forward.
Correct, but I think CEQA only involves the scattergood site, and the CEQA would not be looking at the future sites.
So let me talk through these last two slides, LADWP's next
Thanks.
step, and that might address some of this stuff. So this is a very familiar table. Joe showed it to you earlier. This is part of our SLTRP public outreach. These cases, a handful of these cases to be determined by this advisory group will be put into our SLTRP process. You notice there was a cost element to this. It was a capital cost, but it wasn't a rate cost. You didn't see what impact to the rates. That's where the SLTRP process will come in. So we will take these 12 cases, bring them into the SLTRP public outreach process where we have our...
All 12?
They will have all 12, and as a group, they will have to talk about which ones are they going to want to move forward. Some of these are redundant. If you do one over the other, it's really the same result, like 11 and 12, no repowering. So there are some that you don't need to duplicate. We cannot, in our IRP process, in the time that we have for that process, analyze all 12 through a rate case type of basis. So through the outreach, the public outreach, we will concur in that process, which starts next week, on these cases and develop 3 to 5 cases that will carry through into the SLTRP. That was outlined there. But this next one, this is really, I think, where the board, you would find this very interesting in terms of a decision making. So in December, we will commence our SLTRP. And that process will last probably 4 to 5 months, where we convene them, we do a kickoff meeting, we present all the inputs, just like the normal SLTRP process. We will model that stuff within a month after that, come back to the group, show them the modeling results, have more discussions, and there will be this dialogue that carries us through into like a March timeframe. And we're anticipating around May. I say March, April, because we have to do internal review after that. We have to come up with our recommended case based off of all the feedback that Joe outlined in his previous presentation. We're looking at around a May timeframe to bring the 2018 SLTRP, and that will have a recommended case. And that may have one of these cases there. So this is where now the board is going to see, okay, this is the direction the department wants to go. We were going to do it at the same time, but we pushed it out one extra board meeting such that on the second board meeting, here we're asking for a CEQA initiation of the scattergood process.
Okay.
So even today, as you saw the recommendation, there is going to be a vetting process. There's going to be I need to digest all this. You know, it's a lot of info. We don't want to make these kind of decisions without that final report, too.
Well, there's a vetting process, but I mean, let's just not kid each other. I mean, there are also some things on the table, at least as it relates to the ones through cooling, that is what it is. I mean, there are certain things, again, you've got flashing red lights, so.
So that's where the final report would be helpful to augment the presentation, right? To be informed. We've heard feedback from groups, hey, we want to see your report. This presentation's a great high-level summary of everything. That's why we're targeting the February for the report, because that's as quick as they can kick out the last volume, and we can get the review. And that will give our external stakeholders, whoever is interested,
some opportunity to validate.
Exactly.
To review and validate.
That's right.
When I say vetting, I mean vetting, for me, vetting is kind of additional. It's some sort of testing analysis, which, but you're right. So vetting or validate, this is giving it's the part of building that consensus, and I think to Otto's concerns, it also gives the stakeholders who are most involved in this area the ability to look at feasibility, to understand how kind of what can be done, how quickly it can be done, what direction might make the most sense as it relates to meeting all three of those little bubbles that
Yeah.
were presented
That's
in
right.
the first instance: system reliability, environmental stewardship, the marriage of reliability, stewardship, and costs.
That's right.
So, so that's what will be taking place over the next several months. I assume that what you're looking at then is the through this broad kind of review, both our own internal review coupled with additional almost environmental peer review of
Right.
where we're going, that we develop a level of consensus community-wide around a direction that is sort of our initial stake in the ground, that with an understanding that it's subject to modification should there be, as technology begins to upgrade itself, and we can factor that into the overall plan moving forward.
I see there's 3 slices of the apple.
Mhm.
There is whatever the SLTRP process brings out with these options. Then in May, there's the CEQA process that we're going to say, hey, we got to get fully blown. And when you talk CEQA, think in terms of site, not so much technology.
You got it, yes, of course.
Because one thing this report did validate, something has to happen at Scattergood. The only 2 options this report is energy storage or gas. Either project needs a CEQA process, regardless. So we can initiate a CEQA process and go down to a path and not get to a commitment point. That's what the CEQA process is all about. We got to get, if we go energy storage, which is the other option for Scattergood, if we look at the Scattergood option, we don't have a big library of utility-built energy storage in our environmental library. So even getting that information going would be helpful to the end run of that site. Again, whether we go gas or we go energy storage, all this gets put into the CEQA. One of those 2 will become a preferred case. That preferred case will come to the board sometime in 2020, assuming we initiate it in 2019. Takes about a year or so, a little over a year. You will have a preferred case based off of this environmental assessment. That doesn't hold you to that decision. At any time, you can pick the other alternatives.
Yeah, I was simply saying through the CEQA process, based on how you scope it and what you're analyzing, you
Yes.
can preserve some flexibility through that process. So that was really my only observation around that.
The thing I do want to add to Mr. Wright's comment about the 5-year construction, procurement is big. That's a big, long lead item. To get procurement, you need specs, you need design, you need a direction. So when we talk closer to the 2024 date, it's not just the construction, but the actual upfront procurements and design to that. That always has to be factored into that time frame and that timeline.
Thank you. I don't have anything else. I appreciate it. It was a really useful and well-presented item.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one last question that I just, from your last comment that you made about procurement. I know in the past we talked about an RFO, request for offering. And I'm wondering if the consultants now could develop an RFO where we can ask the market to respond on how DWP can or cannot fulfill the needs that we have without repowering. I know that in a previous meeting, when we also talked about OTC, we mentioned something, there was some mention of an RFO, and I believe you have done a very comprehensive job. I mean, this is incredible. And taking into account so many different variables, but it's hard. It'll be hard for you to predict a real model unless you really ask the market to see if they can fulfill what we want or not. So I'm wondering if this is something that you are thinking about, and especially now just listening to you through the CEQA process, if we could develop something like that where the outside market can actually help us better, not assess, but better help us understand or contribute to see how we can better meet our needs.
So the RFO that has been utilized by other utilities, it was on a site-by-site basis, and they were basically asking the question, what can we do at this site other than natural gas? and they got back a bunch of replies. And those replies were different alternative energy and everything. We've done that through the once-through cooling. The once-through cooling basically said, what can we do to these sites if you get rid of the gas? So just for clarity, the once-through cooling on that level functioned as our RFO, except that it was a holistic approach and it centered around reliability. The RFO process would not be able to send out to all vendors, here's our system information. ROTC had our system information. It was very specific to our reliability needs, not our capacity needs, our resource needs. So that's one kind of...
But can we do that now?
Yeah,
We
and-
have all the
Yep.
scenarios, we
But
have the
I'm just-
information.
So I'm curious, is there something, because the report seems to cover just about, I guess my question, and again, just because I'm not as well versed as other people involved in this process are, is there some technology or some, is there a technology that is not considered or not represented that you think is missing in terms of
So-
what they've analyzed?
So I think that, I'm sorry, so
Yeah.
I think the idea of the RFO is not so much about the technologies that can be in it, because there are a variety of, a pretty large menu here. But the consultants have been given a task, which is show us the roadmap, having certain patterns for us to see a DWP. The market can tell us, this is what we can do or not for this price or at this time, or you all shaking your heads. I'm glad that I'm not off base here. So I would like to see that. I would like to see what the market can also offer. And say, look, we have these scenarios. These are some of the things that we want to see or that we need to see. And let the market show what are some of the possibilities out there. Because this study is a little bit different than an RFO in the sense that consultants have been given a task. And now what I'm asking is, with these findings that we got from this study and recommendations, can the market also offer an alternative and maybe some innovation to us as of how we can meet our needs?
So
I'd like to step in because I totally could not agree with you more. But that being said, I think that our department has made such great strides in being more transparent and inviting experts to truly join in a fair, unbiased way to apply and offer their ideas to the department. I mean, this is a televised board meeting. All of these documents are available for everyone's review. I think that California is leading our nation in not only setting goals, but meeting, if not meeting them before their deadlines. I appreciate the fact that we are ahead of this. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we are inviting the best and the brightest to help us in this very, very complex issue. Not only are we teaming up, partnering, supporting financially the best of minds within local universities, but we're also inviting international masterminds to help us solve these problems. So I agree with Commissioner Vasquez. If this needs to be expanded upon, I think we should, but I think that we're really making great strides in that capacity. I know that we have been working internationally on many big issues, and I assume that we are incorporating the best heads of states and masterminds to deal with these issues as well. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, except as it relates to this particular study, just so we can all be, as it relates to this particular study, and it's one of the reasons I asked the question around what inputs did we, kind of what the data sets were for what was being analyzed. It sounds like first and foremost, what we were told was we were looking at what is currently at mature technologies, because so much of this is centered around reliability, in addition to environmental stewardship. So it's not, I mean, and as it relates to how we're weighting what it is we're seeking to achieve, reliability and environmental stewardship are almost equal weight. So, so it seems as if what was being considered are those strategies and technologies that that we are certain can be both deployed currently, and that in certain combinations will meet our reliability standards. Is that?
That's correct.
And so I think that as I look at this, that as it relates to the specific task at hand, what we're seeking to understand is how we might meet our reliability standards with and achieve the maximum energy or environmental stewardship. I mean, that's the goal. And the potential for there to be some additional or more either improvement in technology or some other options, if those were to come forward, I assume that we would factor them into our current set of considerations and recommendations. But where we are right now today is, and that's why I asked, is there something that we think we've missed? Because where we are right now today is having reviewed all of those options that we believe can be effectively deployed to meet reliability, along with minimizing our environmental impacts. Is that?
So one thing we can establish once the SLTRP advisory committee convenes and they establish the cases, while that modeling goes on, we're kind of in a holding pattern until they do the rates. We can, in parallel, and it's very similar to your RFO, but our process calls it an RFI. We can send an RFI out saying, here are the cases that our SLTRP advisory group have come up with, and we're analyzing into our SLTRP process. And we can send that out as we've done with the energy storage. We sent out an RFI to energy storage and said, tell us about, what can you do? It's the same concept. It was just a little different because one was complete replacement. This is saying, this is what we're asking you for. Tell us the latest technologies that you can do to achieve, for example, 1,800 megawatts of whatever the case is.
Are you referring to all the cases?
Yes.
All the 12 cases, got it.
So if you,
that's a good idea.
yeah, just so that we're all, so like we'll just take the case 6, but it could be 4 or 5 of the cases in the SLTRP in an RFI. We can say, this is what we want to achieve. We want to achieve this much energy storage, this much by this year. Tell us how we can do it. And we might get people coming back, vendors coming back saying, I got a technology that is just cutting edge and I can achieve it. The difference in the RFO process you mentioned earlier is they were asking for direction.
Right.
We're not asking for direction. We got the direction, whatever those cases are. What we're asking for is how to optimize that direction. That feels like something that is what
That's
works.
what I was proposing.
Okay.
Thank you all for translating for me. Thanks for the translators out there.
No, and just to summarize my thoughts, when we were considering what were the proper solar tariffs, a very esteemed group of German people came because they talked about their case study and what they learned from their mistakes. Similarly, I think that we need to reach out, as we have in the past with other countries, and learn from previous mistakes to enhance refining our efforts going forward, especially since this is such an expensive issue and an important one. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this very thoughtful and helpful presentation?
So we left here this is really focused towards your board? We're okay.
Sometimes we're done is a good place to end.
Well said, Mr. General Manager.
Got it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we go to Management Report 8C, discussion of proposed tribal engagement policy in the Owens Valley.
That would be mine. And as we get started here, we've got some of our team that's going to help me present this morning. This morning's item is for informational only. It's our intention to bring back the engagement policy, tribal engagement policy, to your board at our April 11th meeting for an actual decision on that. I'm going to start off the presentation this morning and give a little bit of background and introduction of the policy. But seated before you is our own Anselmo Collins, who is our Director of Water Operations. Coming up to the table is George Kavork. He's with the Mayor's Office. George is the tribal liaison for the Mayor's Office, and seated in the center is Dr. Manley Begay. I will do a little bit more introduction with Dr. Begay. He's a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and he is the former co-director of the Harvard Project on American Indian Economic Development in the John F. Kennedy School of Government of Harvard University. And in addition, he is a faculty member at Northern Arizona University, where he teaches courses on nation building, curriculum development, and indigenous education. And he has worked as a consultant for federal agencies, and he's working for us as a consultant as well on our Owens Valley tribal issues, and curriculum development specialist and researcher for Tribal College, and reviewer for several major textbook publishing and film companies. And furthermore, his research and consulting experience has focused on projects about and for Native nations in the promotion of strong and effective institutions of governance and leadership. And it's on that last point that we have experienced his great assistance to us. Well, the department certainly has a history of conflict in the Eastern Sierra. And much of that conflict stems...
Rich, let me just make a procedural comment. I'm aware of the fact that there's some public comment, people here to do public comment, either here or in Bishop. I'd like to do the presentation first, but we're not going to ignore the public comment. It'll be welcomed after the presentation.
Thank you. So much of the conflict that we've had in the Eastern Sierra really stems from the fact that the residents of the Owens Valley have been deprived of the opportunity and or the right to share in the development of the valley. And my own operating principle for the city, being a landowner in the Owens Valley, is that we are a corporate citizen of the Eastern Sierra, and we can't at the same time be the valley's one of the valley's largest landowners and not assume the great level of responsibility that goes with that role. In other words, we can't be independent from the people and the interests that surrounds us in the Eastern Sierra. So that's not only true for those represented by the county governments up in the Eastern Sierra, but also by the sovereign tribes. So this policy attempts to engage with the tribal nations of the Owens Valley and build really long-lasting relationships and provide them with a direct opportunity to affect the future of their lives on the lands in the valley. The policy actually originated as a condition put upon us by the State Lands Commission in the performance of our dust control activities on Owens Lake. We owned a lot of land in the Owens Valley. We don't own Owens Lake. And all our activities on the lake are conditioned under lease provisions because the lake is owned by the state and managed by the State Lands Commission. And the commission recently required a tribal liaison and a tribal consultation policy as one of those lease provisions. The reason for that is that the state land staff perceived that we weren't conducting our affairs with the proper attention and respect to the Owens Valley tribes. And although we've had a long relationship with the tribes in the valley, and specifically recently on Owens Lake, I personally took the comment to heart and determined that a mere consultation policy on construction projects on Owens Lake was not good enough. We needed something much more. So since we operate throughout the valley and not just on Owens Lake, and because we have the view that we should be more inclusive with its residents, we decided to put together a policy for you that would cover all our operations and not just those on Owens Lake. And additionally, this policy would have the distinct features to be able to specifically address the concerns of each tribe independently. Now, there are two major principles that I see that are unique to our policy. First is the department commits to provide direct access to you, Board of Commissioners, through what we're calling a Tribal Engagement Committee. So this will provide opportunities to collaborate and participate on policy level issues, and not just, for example, construction projects the department might propose. And what I mean by policy issues are those issues that deal with land use, economic development, or cultural sensitivities. So what this is going to require is something of you, the board members. So at least one or two of you will be members of this committee. And the commitment would be that you would meet on some type of regular basis with the tribal members individually as tribal members govern themselves, so with their tribal governing councils on a one-on-one basis on however times you determine throughout the year and whatever methods you determine to do that. And secondly, the interaction between the tribes and the Board of Commissioners in terms of matters of importance and methods of communication will be developed separately and individually with participating tribal governments. So the tribal engagement policy you have is a framework, and it sets forth certain commitments, but anything specific to do with a tribe in terms of how they want to communicate and really what's on the agenda will be developed separately in really a separate side agreement. And whoever represents the board will come back to the full board for ratification on any kind of decision that was made. There are several other principles that are listed as commitments in this policy, and significant among those is the appointment of a tribal liaison to facilitate communication and act as a focal point of communication between the board's committee, executive staff here at Water and Power, and the sovereign tribes themselves. And Julie Spate, who's in my executive office, is and has been acting as that liaison. This tribal engagement policy aims to clearly differentiate its policy on formal tribal consultation under what's called Assembly Bill 52, which is conducted for Los Angeles Department of Water and Power projects throughout California, and that's both water and power. And I'm going to ask Nancy Setley later in the presentation to provide clarification and some comments with respect to this. So again, it's important to note that even if your board adopts this policy, you can change the terms as you see fit over time. So I expect that this will get us started. You'll start meeting with each tribe, develop some operating principles with those tribes, and if the policy needs to change, then you're free to change the policy at any time. And what we're providing is at least a framework that can be built upon. And again, any specific engagement with any particular tribe will be done independently with those tribes. Now, the State Lands Commission had initially required a consultation policy to be adopted by June of this year. However, they've allowed us additional time until this year's end to develop this much more expansive tribal engagement policy. They had a narrow focus on Owens Lake, and we've expanded it for the entire Owens Valley. So therefore, we want to provide you this briefing to aid you in the decision that we'll bring to you at your next meeting. Now, we've purposely not provided you a copy of the engagement policy at this time, and the reason for that is that we have provided the policy, the document, to the tribes, and the gentlemen that are before you now have met with the tribes over the policy and have been seeking comments in person, and then we have received some comments in writing. And I think we forwarded you comments from Big Pine Tribe over the weekend. So those comments are being reviewed for adoption, and you will be presented with the final version of the policy along with our response to all those comments. And I'm going to ask Anselmo to start and talk about just any general comments he wants to make, but also the process going forward of dealing with the comments received by the tribe. Anselmo?
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Anselmo Collins, Director of Water Operations. Like Rich said, we've been working on this for actually quite a while, about a year or so. And we hired Dr. Begay, I think it was in May of this year, and we started a series of meetings with the tribes. Our first one was in June, where we met with each tribe individually, and when I say tribe, specifically it was the Bishop Paiute tribe, the Big Pine Paiute tribe, the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone tribe, and also the Fourth Independence tribe. At that meeting, it was mainly to kind of lay out the roadmap that we wanted to follow to develop the policy, introduce Dr. Begay as a resource that not only we could use, but the tribes could use as well to help us in developing this policy. After that meeting in August, we provided the tribes with a copy of the draft policy and requested some feedback. We met in early August to get some feedback, and we got a lot of comments from the tribes, but also the request to have a little more time. So we provided additional time. We got comments as late as I think it was last week. So right now we're in the process of looking at all the comments, trying to figure out the things that we can incorporate. One commitment that I had made to the tribes, so each one of them, is that any comment that they make, we are going to respond to it. So if we're not going to include it in the policy, they're going to know why, so that there is no question that we did consider their comments and determine whether or not it should be part of the policy. And like Rich said, this is a document that I think can evolve with time as well. But the idea is that we wanted to get feedback from all the tribes. So right now, as it stands, we're working on making the final touches on the policy, taking into consideration all the comments from the tribes. And our goal is to bring this policy to the commission for consideration at the December 11th meeting. So at that time, we will be asking you to please take a vote on whether or not you support the policy. Once it's approved, and if it's approved, it will be forwarded to the California State Lands Commission by the 23rd of December, which is the deadline that was given to us. And then it's going to be heard by their board more than likely in January. I believe they have a meeting in November, next one in January. So that's kind of basically the process. But one thing I wanted to highlight is that it's not just been about developing a policy and also meeting with the tribes. We also tried to provide opportunities for development. So one of the things that we did back in July, Dr. Begay actually had a tribal leadership, management, governance, and strategy meeting. It was a training, actually, that took place in Arizona. And LA Water and Power sponsored 4 tribal members to attend. At the end, only 3 were able to attend, but we felt that it was important to provide that as a tool for them to further develop their skill set as well. As a matter of fact, there has been a recent request to hold a similar training class in Owens Valley. And that's more likely going to be in January in Lone Pine. I've already told Dr. Begay that I want him to move ahead with this. I'm hoping that we'll be able to have very successful training, and that is an executive education session, and it's a 2-day training class as well. So the idea is we're trying to develop better relationships, more transparent relationships with the tribes. We believe that this policy is just a framework, but when we get into the specifics of each tribe and how we communicate and engage, I think that's going to be where we're going to really be able to get into the details that everybody's looking forward to. I want to keep my comments short because I'd like Dr. Begay to have more time so that he can provide you with his perspective after being working for us for the last 8 to 9 months or so. Dr. Begay.
Thank you, Anselmo. And commissioners and everyone, good afternoon. I'm a professor at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. And before that, I served as a professor also at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And before that, I was an instructor and a lecturer at Harvard University at the Kennedy School of Government and also at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And over the past 30 years or so, much of my work has really revolved around what I would call indigenous nation building. And so that really focuses specifically on governance, institution building, and in the work that I've been asked to do for DWP, it's really in that realm as well as increasing communication and sort of fully engaging with tribes in Owens Valley. And so since May, that's been the work that I've been engaged in. So it's been a relatively short period of time. You know, it's been, 7 months, and we're just getting our boots wet, so to speak. And but within this amount of time, I think I would say a lot has happened. What DWP is focusing on is different and it's new, and to me it's exciting. It's not unlike other industry that have engaged with tribes. I think this is a really good step, especially with the tribal engagement document, which is basically a statement of commitment to tribes and how DWP will be working with the tribes. And since I've been hired on, I've made, 4 trips to Owens Valley. And the last trip was with Commissioner Vasquez, and I really appreciated that trip because I learned a lot. I learned a lot on that trip, just the way everything functions with DWP, where actually the water comes from, all the way from Mono Lake, all the way down here to LA. And I would encourage actually every commissioner to do that, you know, to actually see where the water comes from and how everything functions. And it's just a phenomenal, complex operation. It blows my mind, you know, in just the way everything operates. And in the midst of that, you have Native nations actually nestled there for, you know, hundreds of thousands of years. And I think we're moving in a really good direction in thinking about how to more fully engage with tribes. And I think this next step after the engagement policy is, if and when it's approved, I think that's when sort of the real work will begin, is beginning to figure out how do we engage with those tribes? How do we more fully engage with those tribes so that we respond to their needs and actually begin to think about how to be good neighbors, you know? And I think that's the exciting part. So I'm really looking forward to the next step after the TEP is moved forward. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Begay. George?
George Kavork with the Mayor's Office. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This has been an important part of the Mayor's Office, and our engagement with the department has made this a significant priority for us, and I'm very glad to see the commitment by the Commissioners who've made the trips, who've had the conversations on this policy. To keep this short, I think the message from the Mayor's Office and that we've heard from the tribes, and we'll probably hear again today, is that this is the first step in establishing transparency of a process. It is a first step in establishing access to our commissioners with our longstanding history with the tribes, and it's a step in establishing some sort of formality and framework for our engagement with the community. It was surprising to many that we didn't have such a process, but I think we've put together the right team of folks who have analyzed the situation, have looked at the history, and are working on an individualized document that will hopefully address all of the challenges and all the objectives that each of the tribes seek to accomplish. I think that's the also important part, is that this is going to be an individualized, tailored outreach for each of the tribes. So with that, I just thank you for including our office in this effort, and thank you, Dr. Begay, for his expertise.
And then, Anselmo, can you make way for Nancy to come up? Nancy, I'd like you to speak to questions regarding AB 52 consultation.
So I'll keep my comments brief, but you may be aware that the legislature several years ago added a requirement into CEQA for project-specific environmental review to notify tribes and to engage with tribes on specific projects. So that process has been in place here at Water and Power for a number of years now. It's a part of every CEQA document, and we go through the CEQA checklist that's sort of required by the state. And so this is a sort of separate but related process that's focused on specific projects and specific CEQA documents that come to your to the board for your review and decision on. So, and the legislature intended that agencies that must engage in CEQA reviews initiate contact and consultation with tribes early on in the CEQA process to identify whether there are any tribal resources that may be affected by the specific project, and then take efforts to mitigate any impacts on tribal resources. So that process is ongoing. We do it with every CEQA document to establish whether there's any impact on tribal resources, to contact those tribes, to invite them to consult. So that process will continue sort of in parallel with the tribal engagement policy.
So the consultation policy is incorporated by reference into the engagement policy. So with that, that concludes our presentation.
I must confess that while I'm always a fan of transparency and accountability and cooperation, and I'm sure I am in this instance too, there's a somewhat mysterious process. And in the course of the 5 years I've been here, I generally had some sense of where you're headed. And I wonder if you could give the board some sense of where you're headed with this document that you're going to present to us in the next few weeks, before we see it.
The document itself is only 3 pages long, the engagement policy. The tribes have seen it. We've received comments. We're incorporating their comments into that, and we will be forwarding them that final document to you in your next board package. And included with that will be the response to comments that we received to the tribe, as Anselmo mentioned.
But so you're presenting this as a final document to us that we don't have the ability to participate in drafting, in formulating and working through?
Well, I think along those lines, one of the things that I was interested in, I think you just made that commitment that anything that comments that were provided or suggestions that were made that aren't incorporated into the document, that we'll know what those are.
Correct.
And the staff's reasons for not incorporating them, et cetera, correct?
Correct. And we had hoped to have it to you more than just 2 meetings in advance. And again, any changes that you would want, again, it's really a living document. And if there's any types of things that you wanted to add or delete, you can do that freely at any time in the future. So it really is truly a framework. It's a series of commitments by the department. The main thing it does is establishes that committee, which we've talked about before, and that's really the main commitment to this board. And then really any actual kind of real detailed actually actions by the department will be developed by that board's committee in the future, and then be brought back to the full board for ratification or adoption.
Well, speaking for myself, while I'm sure that in general this is a good idea, I'd like to have the opportunity to have some input in it before we get a final document that you expect us to vote on.
Sure, we can send the draft document to you as soon as today.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask if there's a legality so that we can get this document, or why is this process so exclusive to the board members? Is it like an issue for us to see it, or is it like?
No, I just didn't want to give you the unfinal document, but if you want to see the work in progress, we can certainly give that to you. It's just in a draft format.
It's not ready yet. Got
So
it.
the tribes have seen, it's a public document. The tribes have seen that.
Well, Mr. Harsick, I'd like to commend you on making this happen. I've served on the Owen Standing Committee for, I believe it's been 11 or 12 years now, so this comes very close to heart. And I think that I've been privileged to see how this has matured over the months. And perhaps I think the department was trying to spare the other commissioners because you have so much on your plate, but I agree. I think that really is the case. But
well, and we have shared it with you too, I think.
Yeah. No, I've seen it,
in the
and
summary,
she has. But
Yeah.
if
If a couple of people have seen it, that makes me feel better.
Okay.
And I've seen the comments from other folks too, just to be transparent.
Okay, well,
here.
good. I wasn't aware of
The
that.
comments come to my email.
It's all news to me.
But that being said, I mean, this is a very, very historic moment, and that I think that we really, again, as a department, we're trying to do the right thing, and this is way overdue. Dr. Begay, I welcome you to serve as the diplomat in realizing great things for the department as well as the Native American tribes. That being said, I just wanted to add, because I do feel that in previous years there's been a lack of communication and education, and that, yes, over 100 years ago the aqueduct was formed, and on wet years the department relies on approximately 30% of its water resources from the aqueduct. But during our drought years, we've taken a fraction of that to stand by our responsibilities to protect the lands in Owens Valley, and we have paid a premium to buy water supplies from other sources. So I think just on record, it's important to make a note of that. That being said, I've been involved in too many miscommunications whereby easy fixes could have been addressed much more quickly, and hopefully with this document, we won't have long processes to fixing pipes or archaeology findings to do what we need to do to mitigate the damage that we did to Owens Valley in the 70s. So I think this is a wonderful, wonderful stride in the right movement, and I take great pride of being a commissioner today. I applaud our board, General Manager Wright, and the Department of Water, the Division of Water.
Well, hearing that from my esteemed colleague makes me feel much better. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Well, then let's call for the public comment at this time and see if there are other comments afterwards.
Yes, we have 2 public comments, both from Owens Valley. The first speaker will be Paul Huet.
You ready?
Yes, Paul.
Start that.
We're ready.
Start the timer. Start the timer. Good afternoon, commissioners, and I just want to thanks for the time. That last stuff that you guys went through, I feel for y'all. But I heard a couple times transparency and inclusive throughout your guys' meetings so far since it started, and we with the tribe, I know we're kind of unfamiliar with that because working with the Department of Water and Power at times, we found block walls and exclusions. So we're hopeful. I'm hopeful that that's where we'll be, and it's unfortunate that it takes a policy for this to happen. But I think it's a right step, like Ms. Noonan had said. I just want to thank all the ones that came up, Samuel Collins, also known as AC, Manly Begay, and Mr. Kavork. The last meeting was very, very good, and I'm very optimistic that we're in the process of a brighter path for where we need to be, and communications is a huge thing, and I heard that Commissioner Noonan said that, and I think that this is. To me, this is very a good thing, and like I said, it's unfortunate that it takes something like this in writing to have us to come together to actually collaborate instead of just consultate. Let's work together on how to maintain. I know that we're far away from y'all, and sometimes it's easy to kind of get overlooked, and. I'm all about our sovereignty. We have our own constitution. We have our own tribal elections. So our sovereignty is a huge thing to me. And I just want to thank you for their time. I'm going to beat the buzzer this time. It'll probably be one of the only times that I do. So I just want to thank you. Thank you, commissioners, and Christina and Ara. Thank you very much. And Richard, those are wonderful comments. I really appreciate that in the beginning of your spiel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Your spiel.
The next speaker will be Ellen Baycock.
Hello, I'm Alan Baycock from the Big Pine Paiute Tribe as well. And just to re-echo, I think, some of Paul's comments, but also Mr. Gavork's comments, that we do recognize this as really a good first step in being able to develop more mutual understanding of each other. Respect is something that is provided over time, and as that respect is built over time, then trust is able to be developed as well. And I know we have had a difficult situation, I would say, here over the last 100 years between the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power and tribes, and that we see this location in a very different way than people in Los Angeles do. And in fact, even as Mr. Harisick was sharing about development and that being one of the core issues, well, maybe it'll be a core issue for some, but for tribal people, development and what that looks like and entails has a very different type of connection because of our real strong place in location here in the Owens Valley. And so it is in that we do find a policy like this is really to help develop a stronger, deeper understanding of who we are as people. We're a people that is living and breathing, and has a culture as well that is living and breathing. And it's not about things that are just in the past, though we want to protect those. We also recognize that we have a future that we have for our children and grandchildren and generations to come. And so being able to work on a relationship together is of importance. The tribe had sent comments, and with those comments, just want to share one in particular that the tribe had, and that's that the tribe requests that LADWP present a credible, transparent plan for its long-term operations in the Eastern Sierra. Doing a request of that and seeing something in return, I think will really help to benefit the long-term relationship that the tribes here in the Valley have with those at DWP and with Los Angeles as a whole. And I just want to thank you for the time this afternoon.
Thank you.
That is it for public comments.
If I may, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the mayor's office. Dr. Begay, Mayor Garcetti spent an entire day at the Owens Valley. This is very close to his heart, and as commissioners, I think we take great pride that the mayor has partnered up in realizing this agreement and the well-intended spirit of it, which I hope is very fruitful for everyone involved.
Well, this sounds like a cause for celebration. Are there other comments or questions at this point?
I have a quick question. This is specifically this tribal engagement policy with the folks up in the Owens Valley.
Owens Valley.
Owens Valley, sorry. Owens Valley. Okay. So folks that we have worked with on the Navajo Nation and other nations, we don't have a policy with them.
Well, none of the department's properties interact with the Navajo Nation.
Okay.
Now, within the city, I mean, there's a number of tribes here within the city, and we may actually, in Nevada or Utah, there might be a my comments were to water for
Oh,
that.
okay.
Although
Excellent.
this policy is for Owens Valley for both water and power. Okay.
Thank you. Oh, I think Nancy's coming. Thank you. Come to my
Just wanna
rescue.
clarify for AB 52 consultation, that applies regardless of where the project is, as long as it's in California, and whether it's a power or water project. So we do a number of, for a number of the CEQA reviews for projects here in the LA Basin, we consult with the tribes in the LA Basin as well for the AB 52 part of the consultation. But
Right.
as Rich said, this tribal engagement policy covers water in the Owens Valley.
Got it. I'm just thinking that, the Navajo Nation, for example, provided power to us for so long, and some other tribes in Utah, and I was just wondering if we're intended to have similar tribal engagement policies with them. And as we continue our divestment from their, economy, but continue being present there, how we also take the example of this very successful case of working with the tribes up in Owens to also learn how to work and give back to other folks that we have also come and taken resources from their land.
Yeah, I think this will be a great start on that. Get some experience here and
Thank
then
you.
see where it's applicable elsewhere.
Yeah, I just want to commend you, Richard, and Clarence, and there's so many people that were there with me when I had my office hours. I met about maybe 25 people or so. I spent the afternoon just listening to folks' needs and what they wanted, and I couldn't agree more with Commissioner Noonan that there have been so many what I like to call low-hanging fruit, or things that we could really work with the tribes and in that community to make better. Simple things, and planning, and I'm excited to hear of your vision, and you and I have met several times about my own vision in how we can incorporate those, and how this tribal engagement is just a first step of many that we need to have in order to really amend the relationship with this land and with these folks up in the Owens Valley.
All good. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Council?
Oh,
wait.
excuse me.
A couple things.
Filed items in the
Yes.
minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
Just a second. Filed items, 9A, financial services, August.
The August activity report is in your packages if you have any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none. RPS,
Likewise,
energy storage, and electric vehicle, October.
likewise, reports in your
questions?
package.
Hearing none. Elysian Reservoir Community Parks Enhancement Fund, Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks, July through September.
There's been no change from the previous report.
Any questions? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 24th? Levine, Barad, and Noonan were present.
So moved.
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
They are approved. November 6th, Levine, McLean, Hill, Barad, and Vasquez present. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I move.
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those are passed. Now, council.
At this point, we will recess in a closed session, and in accordance with California Government Code Section 54957.1, we'll report any final actions taken there. We are in recess.
We are recessed.